Deep beneath the earth, deeper even than the realm of Hades, there is a place whose very name causes even the gods to tremble. The Greeks called it Tartarus. The Hebrews called it Dudel. But there is a chilling truth few people ever stop to notice. Why in the New Testament does the Apostle Peter deliberately use the Greek mythological term Tartarus to describe the prison of the fallen angels? Could it be that the war of the Titans against Zeus and the rebellion of the angels against God were not separate legends at all, but the same event? A single ancient catastrophe fractured and retold as different myths across thousands of years. In the forgotten chapters of the Book of Enoch, this place is not merely an abstract idea. It is described in disturbing detail as the eternal prison of the 200 Watchers, powerful beings, who broke their sacred oath, abandoned heaven, and handed forbidden knowledge to humanity. Are the chains that bound the Titan Prometheus for stealing fire truly so different from the sentence imposed on the angel Azazel, the one who taught mankind how to forge weapons, and was buried beneath jagged stones in the desert of Dudel? And the Nephilim, the gigantic hybrid offspring, who once ruled the earth through violence, were they the very demigods of Greek epics, remembered under another name? Tonight, we are not simply retelling a myth. We are piecing together fragments of a history that has been shattered for 12,000 years. Let go of the worries of the present moment. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes and allow your mind to drift back to the age of gods. Welcome to Tartarus, the eternal prison of the forgotten. The battle between the giant titans and the gods of Olympus. To understand the secret of Tartarus, we must turn back time far, far into the past, returning to the primordial age of the world, when the order of the universe was still unstable and the gods still walked upon the earth. In Greek mythology, this was the era of the Titanomachy, the Great War of the Titans. It was a civil war that lasted 10 full years, fought between two generations of divine beings. The younger gods of Mount Olympus, led by Zeus, and the ancient colossal and immensely powerful Titans, ruled by Cronus. The epics of Hesiod describe this war as so violent that the seas boiled, the sky cracked apart, and the earth shook to its very foundations, as if the entire universe were being torn in two. But the deeper cause of this terrifying conflict did not begin with Zeus. It began much earlier. Before the age of the Titans, the universe was ruled by Uranos, the sky god, one of the protogenoi, the first primordial beings of all existence. Fearing the strength and potential of his own children, Uranos imprisoned the 100-handed Hecatoncheires and the one-eyed Cyclopes deep within the earth, denying them the light. This act enraged Gaia, the earth goddess mother of the imprisoned beings. From that fury, she conspired with another group of Uranos' children, the Titans, to overthrow the rule of the sky god. Cronus, leader of the Titans, used a sickle forged of adamantine to attack his father, castrating Uranos and stripping him of most of his power. As Uranos withdrew from the world, he uttered a dreadful prophecy. Just as he had been overthrown by his son, Cronus, too, would one day be overthrown by his own son. That prophecy was never forgotten. Gaia repeated it when she realized that Cronus, after taking power, had no intention of freeing the Hecatoncheires and Cyclopes. Instead, Cronus strengthened the guard over Tartarus by appointing the monstrous dragon Campe as its sentinel. Haunted by the prophecy, Cronus sought every possible way to break fate itself. He swallowed all the children born to him, by Rhea imprisoning them within his own body. In this way, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon vanished from the world one by one. The sixth child, Zeus, was meant to share the same fate. But this time Rhea and Gaia intervened. Zeus was secretly taken to a cave on Mount Ida, on the island of Crete, where he grew up in silence and concealment. Before long, Zeus reached maturity, and when the time came, he returned to confront his father. With Gaia's help, a potion was prepared and given by Rhea to Cronus. The potion forced the Titan Lord to vomit up the 5 children he had swallowed long ago. For the first time in many years, the young gods were free. The 6 siblings withdrew to Mount Olympus. There Zeus convened a council of the gods, declaring that anyone who stood with him would retain all rights and privileges, while those who opposed him would lose everything. At this point, war became inevitable. The 3 goddesses, Demeter, Hestia, and Hera, were taken to safety. Hera was said to have lived with Oceanus and Tethys Titans of the first generation. This may seem strange, but not all Titans were loyal to Cronus. Oceanus chose to remain neutral, and the female Titans, known as the Titanides, did not take part in the war. The lines between the factions now became clearer than ever. The Titan side consisted of Cronus Iapetus, Hyperion Coeus, and Creus, along with the 2 sons of Iapetus, Atlas and Menoetius. Iapetus and Menoetius were notorious for their brutality, but it was Atlas who was entrusted with command of the battlefield. The other 2 sons of Iapetus, Prometheus and Epimetheus, did not fight. Prometheus had been forewarned of the war's outcome and chose to stand aside. The Titans were also aided by fearsome allies, such as the goddess Gorgon X, the terrible goat, and Aegeon, the god of violent sea storms. On the opposing side, the Olympian forces initially consisted only of Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, but their numbers soon grew. The first to join them was the goddess Styx, daughter of Oceanus, acting on her father's advice. Styx brought with her her 4 children, Nike, Kratos, Zelos, and Baia. Nike became the charioteer of Zeus throughout the war, while all 4 of Styx's children later served as guardians of the new king's throne. Métis, the goddess of wisdom, also joined the Olympian side and became Zeus's strategic advisor during the conflict. The battle lines were drawn. Zeus and his allies held Mount Olympus, while the Titans fortified Mount Othrys. Fierce clashes erupted. Yet for a long time, the 2 sides were nearly evenly matched. The earth trembled, the air burned, the waters boiled, and the sky rang with cracking sounds. When the war dragged into its 10th year, Gaia intervened once more. She told Zeus that victory could only be assured if he freed the Hecatoncheires and Cyclopes from Tartarus. Zeus descended deep into Tartarus, battled the mighty dragon Campi, slew the Guardian, and released the beings imprisoned since the dawn of time. This became the turning point of the entire war. The Cyclopes, master craftsmen beyond compare, immediately forged weapons for Zeus and his brothers. Zeus received the thunderbolt, Poseidon was given a mighty trident, and Hades was granted the helm of invisibility. The 100-handed Hecatoncheires proved even more formidable. Restored to full strength by ambrosia and nectar, they became unstoppable warriors capable of hurling entire mountains like artillery. Although the Titans attempted to reinforce their forces, the outcome could no longer be reversed. From his chariot guided by Nike, the goddess of victory, Zeus unleashed thunderbolts again and again. One such bolt struck Menoetius, casting him straight down to the depths of Tartarus. The outcome was decided. The Titans were utterly defeated. But Zeus did not kill them. Instead, he imposed a punishment far more terrifying than death. The defeated Titans were bound in chains, cast into the dark abyss of Tartarus, and guarded for all eternity by the very 100-handed Hecatoncheires, who had once been prisoners themselves, now transformed into the wardens of the eternal prison. And that is the story as the Greeks told it. But strangely enough, in a civilization entirely different, the Jewish tradition also whispered of an event remarkably the same. The fate of the angels who betrayed God is revealed clearly in the Book of Enoch. If you are a devoted follower of the mysterious and unsettling stories found in the Bible, then the Book of Enoch is likely no stranger to you. The content of this book is closely associated with the figure of Enoch, the 7th patriarch from Adam, whom Scripture records as one who walked with God and then was no more because God took him. For many centuries, the Book of Enoch nearly vanished from the Western world. After the biblical canon was systematized in the early centuries of the Common Era, this book was no longer widely copied within Rabbinic Judaism or Roman Christianity. Yet in Ethiopia, the Book of Enoch continued to be carefully preserved in the Ge'ez language and became an official part of the Ethiopian Orthodox biblical canon, remaining so to this day. A major turning point came in the year 1773, when the Scottish scholar James Bruce brought Ge'ez manuscripts of the Book of Enoch from Ethiopia back to Europe. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the Western world once again gained access to a complete version of this long-forgotten text. From that moment on, the Book of Enoch began to be translated, examined, and studied with serious scholarly attention. What proves especially striking when studying this book is the account of the fall of the Watchers, which unfolds like a sentence already pronounced before humanity even understood what was happening. 200 powerful angels, known as the Watchers beings, assigned to observe and safeguard the order of the world, abandoned their sacred posts. Led by Semjaza and Azazel, they descended upon Mount Hermon, a place regarded as a point of contact between heaven and earth. There they swore a collective oath, binding themselves to one another as they crossed a sacred boundary together. The Watchers took human women as wives and gave rise to a race of gigantic hybrids, known as the Nephilim. These beings grew rapidly in strength, seized resources, oppressed humanity, and gradually drove the order of the world into chaos. Alongside this intermingling, the Watchers imparted to mankind knowledge that exceeded the limits permitted to human beings. Azazel taught humanity how to forge swords, spears, and armor-turning metal into instruments of conquest. Other angels taught the arts of adornment, cosmetics, jewelry, and ornamentation, awakening desire and unchecked passion. Some taught incantations, astrology, and the summoning of spiritual forces, drawing humanity into dependence on invisible powers they lacked the moral capacity to govern. At that time, the earth echoed with cries of anguish. Blood soaked the ground. Human souls groaned, and their pleas for deliverance rose all the way to heaven. The archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, stood together before the throne of God, reporting the corruption spreading throughout creation. The judgment of the Creator was issued with absolute authority. God entrusted the archangel Raphael with carrying out the sentence against Azazel, the one who had sown violence and defilement among humanity. Raphael bound Azazel hand and foot, led him into the desert of Dudael, cast him into a deep and dark abyss, covered him with jagged stones, and appointed that place as his prison until the day of the great judgment. At the same time, the archangel Michael received the command to bind Semjaza and the remaining Watchers, chaining them within deep caverns beneath the earth where the light of heaven does not reach. The Watchers remained confined there through long ages, witnessing the destruction of their offspring in the great flood and the cleansing of the world's order. These images emerge with a familiarity that sends a chill through the soul. On one side stand the giant Titans, who rose against Zeus in Greek mythology. On the other stand the Watchers, who rebelled against God in Jewish tradition. Both are beings of immense power who once moved between heaven and earth. Both unleashed upheavals that shook the very structure of the cosmos, and both arrived at the same end, bound in eternal chains, cast into the depths beneath the earth, awaiting the final judgment. These parallels appear like perfectly aligned fragments across two civilizations separated by thousands of miles without shared language or religious exchange. Is this merely a coincidental convergence of ancient imagination, or the collective memory of humanity preserving a real event from deep prehistory? A catastrophe descending from heaven that people of that age could only record through the language of myth. And if this is so, then Tartarus and Dudael cease to be mere symbols. They stand as lingering traces of a cosmic prison, a place where beings who crossed sacred boundaries were compelled to bear the cost of their choices. Decoding the similarities, so unsettling that they make one shudder between two narratives that appear completely separate. Let us begin with those at the top. In Greek mythology, the leader of the Titans is Cronus, the god who overthrew his own father Uranos to seize the throne of the cosmos. Cronus ruled during the Golden Age, wielded supreme power, and clung to that dominion at any cost. In the Book of Enoch, the fallen angels also have leaders of their own. Shemyaza steps forward to organize the collective oath on Mount Hermon, while Azazel plays the role of spreading destructive knowledge to humanity. They abandon the sacred positions entrusted to them. In heaven, turn toward the earthly realm and seek power, influence, and human worship. Cronus, Shemyaza, and Azazel all represent an older divine generation. They are beings who once occupied central roles in the original order of the world, who held vast authority before a new order came into being. When the age of transition arrived, they chose to stand against the arrangement of divine will. The next parallel emerges even more clearly in the lineage they left behind. According to the Book of Enoch and the Book of Genesis, when the fallen angels united with human women, they gave rise to the Nephilim. Scripture refers to them as the mighty men of renown, while also portraying them as violent giants whose strength surpassed that of ordinary humans, spreading brutality, oppression, and bloodshed across the earth. Ancient Jewish tradition records that the Nephilim consumed all available resources and then turned on humanity itself, filling the world with cries of suffering. Now turn to ancient Greece. When the gods of Olympus united with mortals, they produced the demigods. Hercules possessed extraordinary strength. Achilles stood nearly invulnerable. Perseus was born to slay monsters. They too were figures of exceptional power, moving between two realms, born from the union of divine and human. In Greek tradition, these descendants were celebrated as heroes. In Jewish tradition, similar descendants were regarded as the source of corruption that required purification. Two civilizations, two moral lenses reflecting the same reality, a hybrid bloodline that exceeded the original order of creation. Do the Nephilim and the demigods share the same origin? Are these simply two different records describing the same race of giants preserved in humanity's ancient memory? And then both stories move toward the same conclusion. In Greek mythology, Zeus rises as the representative of the new order. With thunderbolts and power from the heavens, he defeats the Titans, shakes the earth and sky, and breaks the dominion of the older generation. The defeated Titans are bound in chains and cast down into Tartarus, the deepest region beneath the earth. In biblical tradition, God restores order to the world through the Great Flood. The lineage of the Nephilim disappears from the earth, while the fallen angels are bound and confined in deep abyssal places until the day of final judgment. Fire from heaven and floodwaters cover the world, and creation enters a period of cleansing, whether told through the imagery of lightning or floodwaters. The outcome converges at a single point: the end of the giant generation and the prolonged confinement of beings who crossed sacred boundaries. And just as all of this seems to belong solely to the realm of myth, a crucial detail in the New Testament unexpectedly opens a bridge between the two worlds. In the second epistle of Peter, chapter 2, verse 4, the original Greek text states, "For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to Tartarus." Pay close attention here. Peter, a Jewish apostle writing to Greek-speaking readers, does not use the word Hades, the realm of the dead, nor Gehenna, the place of fiery judgment. Instead, he chooses a single highly specific verb, tartaru, meaning to cast down into Tartarus. Why does he use this word? Because he understands that his readers know exactly what Tartarus signifies. It is the cosmic prison reserved for the Titans, the place where beings who rebelled against divine order are confined. By deliberately employing the language of Greek mythology, Scripture appears to offer a quiet affirmation. Yes, the beings you call Titans are the same fallen angels spoken of here, and the place where they are imprisoned truly exists. So where exactly is this place? Why has it come to be known as the most haunting location in the world? Join SleepCodex as we uncover the answers starting now. How terrifying is the hell known as Tartarus? The underworld, hell, or the realm beyond, are concepts that appear widely in both Eastern and Western cultures. Of course, some people believe in them, others doubt them. Some support these ideas while others reject them. Yet images of the underworld have always been woven into humanity's oldest myths and legends. The world in which humans currently live is called the realm of the living, while the place where beings dwell after death is known as the realm of the dead. From ancient times until now, although many people have regarded these ideas as superstition, there has always been a considerable number of people who genuinely want to know whether the underworld truly exists. Each civilization has developed its own explanation of this realm. According to Greek mythology, deep beneath the gloomy earth lies the underworld ruled by the god Hades. His kingdom is filled with darkness and terrifying scenes. No sunlight from the sun ever reaches that place. The path leading down to the sorrowful realm of Hades consists of immeasurably deep chasms. After death, humans are guided by the god Hermes, also known as the psychopomp, who leads their souls through a dark and desolate region called Erebus toward the gates of the underworld. These gates stand beyond the dreadful garden of Persephone, where many black birch trees and fruitless palm trees grow. Standing before the gates of the underworld is a fierce watchdog named Cerberus, also known as the guardian of hell, whose task is to ensure that no one escapes. This creature is a three-headed monster with serpents coiled around its necks, hissing menacingly. Cerberus is extraordinarily savage, allowing souls to pass inward through the gate, yet never permitting any to return. Hermes completes his duty once he brings the spirits to the banks of the river Styx, also known as the River Acheron. Waiting there is an emaciated old man with white hair, broken teeth, tattered and filthy clothing, and a cold, gloomy, taciturn expression. His name is Charon. He stands by the riverbank with his boat ready to ferry the souls deeper into the dark kingdom of Hades. However, each soul must pay Charon a fare of 1 silver coin known as an obol. Without payment, passage across the river is denied. This rule stands as absolute and unchangeable. For this reason, many cultures developed the custom of placing a coin in the mouth of the deceased. Those who departed the world without proper burial rites performed by their families, including the placement of a coin, were considered deeply unfortunate. Such souls are unable to cross the river Acheron. They remain on the riverbank, lamenting their bitter fate, wandering without shelter year after year. Only later are they granted passage across the river without payment, where they must await judgment from the judges of the underworld regarding their destiny. There is yet another river in this realm known as the River Cocytus, the River of Lamentation. It is said to be formed from the tears of suffering souls in the underworld. Because of this, the river constantly echoes with agonizing and dreadful cries. Beyond the river lies a shadowy field within the kingdom of Hades, covered with pale gray wild tulips. There the souls of the dead drift and wander aimlessly. From this place extend 2 paths, one leading to the blissful paradise of Elysium, and the other leading to a realm of suffering known as Tartarus. In Greek mythology, Tartarus is described as an abyss of extreme depth and darkness, a bottomless chasm lying even deeper than the underworld of Hades itself. At first, Tartarus served as a prison for those regarded as threats to the rule of the gods of Mount Olympus. Later, it became known as a hell of punishment for the guilty, where they endure penalties suited to the crimes they committed. Those who bear guilt must suffer punishment in Tartarus for 1 year, after which they are carried by the waters into Lake Akarusha. There, the offenders must beg forgiveness from those they have harmed. If the victims grant forgiveness, the guilty are allowed to return to the shore. If forgiveness is withheld, the waters carry them back to Tartarus to continue their punishment. This process continues until forgiveness is finally granted. And it is precisely here that Tartarus appears not merely as a place of punishment, but as a moral mechanism within the ancient universe. It is a place where wrongdoing is not only judged, but where souls must confront the consequences of their own actions. The punishment is not absolute annihilation, but a process that requires time, repentance, and forgiveness from those who were once harmed. From this perspective, Tartarus is not simply a hell, but a cosmic prison of purification, where every action leaves a trace and every choice carries a corresponding cost. This is why Tartarus is always depicted as lying deeper than the underworld of Hades, separated from the realm of ordinary souls reserved for those who have broken sacred order. And when these descriptions are placed alongside records from other ancient traditions, especially those found in the Book of Enoch and the Bible, a sense of familiarity gradually emerges, as if humanity is recalling the same truth retold through different languages. Perhaps human history is not as fragmented as we often assume. Perhaps 12,000 years ago, our ancestors looked up at the sky together and witnessed a terrifying cosmic event. Fiery meteorites fell from the heavens, powerful beings were destroyed. The Greeks called it the War of the Gods. The Jewish tradition called it the Judgment of God. Yet the memory of fear, of imprisonment in profound darkness, of prisons beyond the human world, became the only shared language that remained etched deeply into mythology, sacred texts, and the collective subconscious of humanity, enduring to this very day. From this point forward, the story no longer remains confined to mythology or religion. It expands into a domain that modern science has only begun to touch. In the past few centuries, the recurring history of destruction and rebirth, experienced by humanity itself. Historical evidence suggests that human civilization has undergone many cycles of collapse and renewal. Many people have heard of the concept known as prehistoric culture, also referred to as prehistoric civilization. Civilizations that existed before our present one. Prehistoric civilizations and the forgotten cycles of human destruction. Many may already be familiar with the idea of prehistoric culture, or what is also called prehistoric civilization. Here we are speaking precisely about that subject, civilizations that existed prior to the current civilization of humankind. Today, Earth is divided into continents such as Asia, Europe, South America, North America, Oceania, Africa, and Antarctica. In geology, these regions are collectively referred to as continental plates. The formation and stabilization of these continental plates have unfolded over tens of millions of years. Throughout this vast span of time, many landmasses have risen from the ocean floor, while many others have sunk beneath the sea. The stable configuration we see today represents only a brief moment within a geological timeline that stretches across tens of millions of years. What draws particular attention is that in many locations beneath the world's oceans, massive ancient structures have been discovered. These constructions are either intricately carved, displaying a level of refinement and beauty that surpasses the known capabilities of ancient cultures documented by conventional history. They are not remnants of our current human civilization, but were clearly built before the regions in which they stand were submerged beneath the sea. This naturally leads to a profound question. If these structures already existed tens of millions of years ago, who built them? At that point in time, according to prevailing scientific understanding, humanity had not yet appeared. What form of intelligence then created such complex works? In the field of paleontology, archaeologists have identified a life form known as the trilobite, which existed from approximately 600 million to 260 million years ago. After that period, the species disappeared entirely. Yet an American scientist once discovered a trilobite fossil bearing a clearly defined imprint of a human footprint wearing a shoe. The imprint appeared complete, unmistakable, and directly embedded in the fossil layer. This discovery presents a striking paradox. According to evolutionary theory, humans could not have existed 260 million years ago, whose footprint then was preserved on that fossil. At the National University Museum of Peru, there is also a stone engraved with the image of a human figure. Scientific examination dates the engraving to approximately 30,000 years ago. What makes it extraordinary is the detail the figure wears. Tailored clothing, a hat, shoes, and holds what appears to be a telescope while observing the heavens. 30,000 years ago, did humans already know how to weave fabric and sew garments? And if they were using a telescope to observe celestial bodies, that would imply an understanding of astronomy. Yet modern history credits Galileo with the development of the telescope only a few centuries ago. The mysteries do not end there. In caves across France, South Africa, and the Alpine regions, rock murals have been discovered that display astonishing levels of realism. The human figures are finely proportioned, vividly depicted and painted using mineral pigments that have endured across vast stretches of time. Even more striking is their attire, which resembles modern clothing similar to European dress, complete with belts. Some figures hold objects resembling smoking pipes, others carry staffs, and some wear hats. If humans of that era were still living at a primitive stage, where did such artistic sophistication, aesthetic awareness, and technical skill originate? Going even further in Africa, within the Republic of Gabon, there exists a uranium mine. Due to limited industrial capability, the country exports uranium ore to more technologically advanced nations. In 1972, a processing facility in France imported this uranium and conducted chemical analysis. The results revealed that the uranium had already undergone refinement and had been used. This finding astonished the scientific community. Research teams from multiple countries were dispatched to investigate. Ultimately, they confirmed that the mine was in fact a large-scale nuclear reactor, with a design so precise and rational that even modern humans would struggle to construct it. The age of this nuclear reactor was determined to be approximately 2 billion years, and it had operated for roughly 500,000 years. These numbers extend far beyond the explanatory reach of conventional historical and evolutionary models. Discoveries such as these are sufficient to prompt a reconsideration of many sections of modern textbooks. Yet when long-standing concepts become entrenched as fixed systems of thought, accepting new understanding becomes extraordinarily difficult. When a truth emerges that lies outside familiar frameworks, the instinctive response is often doubt and rejection. Because of the influence of traditional viewpoints, there has yet to be a comprehensive, systematic reassessment of prehistoric civilization. Many discoveries, despite their existence, continue to be labeled as superstition and remain broadly unaccepted. Nevertheless, a number of courageous scientists around the world have openly acknowledged that these findings belong to prehistoric culture civilizations that existed before our current one, and not merely once, but across multiple cycles throughout Earth's history. Through examination of excavated artifacts, researchers have observed that these relics do not originate from a single period of civilization. This leads to an important conclusion: humanity has experienced multiple large-scale destruction events. After each event, only a small number of survivors remained, carrying fragments of ancient culture as they entered a new phase of primitive existence. From there, humanity multiplied, once again developed and formed a new civilization. This process has repeated across many cycles. According to physicists, the movement of matter follows laws, and the transformation of the universe as a whole also operates according to law. Earth, within the vast expanse of the cosmos and the motion of the Milky Way, does not remain in a permanently stable state. Celestial collisions or major cosmic disturbances can occur, giving rise to catastrophic civilization-ending events. From this perspective, the history of humanity appears to unfold according to cycles. Some studies suggest that humanity has experienced as many as 81 near-total extinction events. Each time, only a small group survived, carrying faint memories of previous cultures before beginning again from a primordial state. And when we look at these repeating cycles, a deeper understanding gradually begins to emerge. These episodes of destruction do not resemble random accidents of the universe, nor are they merely the result of accidental collisions between natural forces. In humanity's ancient memory behind every collapse, there appears a common element: moral decline accompanied by power that exceeds the limits permitted to it. It is precisely at this point that mythology, sacred texts, and prehistoric traces begin to converge. The Titans were punished for defying the order of Olympus. The fallen angels were bound for betraying the divine will. And the civilizations that vanished from the face of the earth also seem to have reached their end, when humanity lost its most fundamental moral standards. From this perspective, human history no longer appears as a series of disconnected events, but as a process shaped by deliberate order. Each destruction resembles a purification, a moment when power is withdrawn, order is restored and life is returned to its rightful place within the universe. In the earliest stages of human history, peoples across the world, without prior agreement, shared traditions describing how God created humankind. After that, a great flood struck humanity and became a shared, painful memory preserved across cultures worldwide. Yet, with the development of modern science, mythology, and ancient legends gradually came to be regarded as fairy tales and fictional stories within the modern human context. They eventually fell into an awkward position, mentioned only casually, often as bedtime stories told to children. In reality, when we approach these traditions with a more open and inclusive mindset together with rigorous scientific reasoning, it is not difficult to see that the vast amount of information contained in ancient mythology does not conflict with scientific concepts at all. In fact, many scientific advances and discoveries appear to be verifying ancient myths and legends. True scientists do not draw conclusions lightly. The worldview of genuine scientists remains open and expansive. They do not use the limited scope of what is already known to deny the infinite realm of what remains unknown. Those who hastily draw conclusions under the banner of science are in truth acting more like political figures with hidden agendas than seekers of truth. One fact requires no doubt to this day: science has not been able to deny the existence of God, nor has it been able to prove atheism as an absolute truth. On the contrary, many of the greatest scientists during the most flourishing periods of scientific development in history, including figures such as Nicholas Copernicus, Galileo Galilei, Isaac Newton, James Clerk Maxwell, and Albert Einstein, openly acknowledged themselves as firm believers in a creator. They regarded the world as a masterpiece of God awaiting discovery and verification by scientists. Take Isaac Newton, for example, the man honored as the father of modern science. At the age of 18, when he entered Cambridge University, he was already widely known as a devout Christian. Newton frequently recorded his prayers in textbooks and personal journals, and he even integrated his scientific investigations with prayer to God. While exploring faith, he thought about science. While investigating science, he reflected on faith. For this reason, Professor Manuel, a historian at New York University, wrote in his book, Newton, a Biography, that modern science originated from Newton's contemplation of God. Newton firmly believed throughout his life that God is the true master who created this exquisitely ordered solar system. In reality, Newton was not only a great scientist, but also a devout theologian with profound and unique insights. Newton believed that the Bible contained hidden codes, and he devoted more than half of his life, nearly 50 years, to studying Scripture. He produced research manuscripts exceeding 1 million words and continued his studies diligently until the very end of his life. Newton even considered the biblical code more important than the law of universal gravitation, the scientific achievement for which he is best known. What then about Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the modern era, universally recognized around the world? How did he view science, theology, and Buddhism? In one interview, Einstein said, "Some people believe that religion is incompatible with science. As a scientist, I understand deeply that modern science can only demonstrate the existence of something. It cannot definitively determine whether something exists or does not exist." He further explained with an example. If several thousand years ago we had been unable to prove the existence of atomic nuclei and had casually concluded that atomic nuclei did not exist, then today, having discovered them, would we not have committed a grave error? After this discussion, Einstein affirmed his belief in God. Therefore, the fact that science today cannot prove the existence of God is not because God does not exist, but because science has not yet developed to that level. When Einstein studied Buddhist scriptures, he expressed deep admiration, stating from the depths of his heart, if there is anything that could ever replace science, it would be Buddhism. These two world-renowned figures remain unmatched in their influence within modern physics to this day. Therefore, their views and attitudes towards science, theology, and Buddhism stand as the most authoritative and compelling testimony for those who follow atheism and claim to believe only in what they call science. Historical evidence further confirms that many accomplished scientists throughout history never concealed their belief in God, nor did they find any contradiction in being both scientists and believers. According to statistics published in the 1977 book, Scientific Elites by Dr. Harriet Zuckerman of Columbia University, among the 286 scientists who have won Nobel Prizes in scientific fields since 1901, 92% believed in God. Of these, 73% were Christians and 19% were Jewish. United Nations statistics further show that over the past 3 centuries, among 300 outstanding scientists worldwide, 242 openly affirmed belief in God, while only 20 identified as non-believers. Even among the 10 most famous scientists in history, including the inventor Thomas Edison, the founder of microbiology, Louis Pasteur, radio pioneer, Guglielmo Marconi, Samuel Morse, the inventor of Morse code, Erwin Schrödinger, the founder of quantum mechanics, as well as Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein. Every one of them believed in God. From these facts and figures, it becomes clear that the pioneers who opened the path for modern science, along with many other renowned scientists, were overwhelmingly people of religious faith. This demonstrates that scientific research and belief in God are not inherently contradictory. On the contrary, they have walked side by side, supporting and illuminating one another throughout human history. For centuries, the Greek gods have been portrayed as figures driven by lust, jealousy, violence, and power struggles. These stories were embellished, exaggerated, and repeatedly retold through theater novels, film, and popular culture, gradually distorting the image of the gods into morally flawed or even antagonistic figures. Yet very few people ask whether this truly reflects how the ancient Greeks understood their gods, or whether these portrayals are exaggerated interpretations rooted in irreverence toward the divine. It must be remembered that deliberately misrepresenting, defaming, or diminishing the gods is not merely a historical distortion, but an act of disrespect toward beings whom humanity revered and honored for thousands of years. For this reason, in the sections that follow, SleepCodex humbly seeks to clarify and correct stories that have long been misunderstood, not to blindly deify, nor to oppose science or other beliefs, but to restore Greek mythology to its original meaning, helping humanity strengthen its faith in the gods, and through that faith, find peace under divine protection. How chaotic has Greek mythology become today? Today, most of what people know about Greek mythology comes from the epic poems passed down by Homer and Hesiod. These two systems are often regarded as relatively unified and compatible, forming the foundation of modern understanding of Greek myth. However, when examined more closely, it becomes clear that even within these core sources, there are many internal contradictions. Each source in reality reflects a separate version of the same stories. From an academic perspective, beyond Homer and Hesiod, there were many other authors such as Sophocles, Pindar, and Aeschylus, each of whom created mythological themes in their own way. As a result, the original narratives gradually became layered, distorted, and increasingly removed from their original meaning. This was not the end of the matter. In ancient Greek society, there also existed numerous religious groups that did not fully belong to the official Olympian system. Traditions such as Orphism, the Eleusinian mysteries, and other influential cults, each with their own doctrines and interpretations, gave rise to distinct mythological versions within certain spheres. The coexistence of all these elements made the system of Greek mythology ever more complex and increasingly difficult to trace back to its original core. Many readers in the East may not be very familiar with Western mythology, so here it is enough to take two of the most well-known gods, Athena and Apollo, as examples to see just how confusing these variant traditions became. Athena is often referred to as Pallas Athena. One widely circulated version claims that Athena accidentally killed her close friend, the nymph Pallas, while the two were practicing combat together. Overcome with grief, Athena took the name Pallas in remembrance of her fallen companion, hence the title Pallas Athena. Yet, in another version, Pallas is a giant, a male giant killed by Athena during the Gigantomachy, the great war between the Olympian gods and the giants, who rebelled against the rule of Zeus. Still another version states that Pallas was an ancient titan, also defeated by Athena, with no connection at all to the Gigantomachy. Beyond that, some traditions claim that Athena herself was originally named Pallas. And because the people of Athens worshipped her so devotedly, the title Pallas Athena simply meant Pallas of Athens, without reference to any other figure. So many conflicting explanations leave readers unsure of what the original truth might have been. This confusion does not stop with Athena. It extends to Apollo as well. The title, Phoebus Apollo, the god of music, poetry, light, and the sun, also becomes ambiguous across different mythological traditions. In the age of the 12 Titans, Hyperion, the son of Gaia and Uranus, was originally the deity associated with light and the sun. But when his son Helios later appeared in myth, the two figures gradually became confused with one another. Helios drove the chariot of the sun across the sky each day, bringing light to the world, and for this reason, he too was known as the sun god. Over time, overlapping traditions led many people to further confuse Helios with Apollo, the son of Zeus. If this chaos had been limited merely to uncertainty over identities, it might not have caused serious moral harm. But when writers and the public began freely reshaping mythology according to personal preferences, turning the gods into tools of entertainment and emotional stimulation, the culture itself was pushed toward a dangerous boundary. By the late 7th century BCE, characters from different mythological traditions began to overlap in increasingly chaotic ways. Relationships between gods and heroes were portrayed as more intimate and mundane. Among these appeared numerous fantastical stories describing relationships between male gods and male heroes. Tales that once symbolized pure friendship and sacred bonds gradually became distorted, carrying with them moral decay and the pursuit of unhealthy psychological stimulation. From this environment, male homosexuality began to spread within ancient Greek society. The author suggests that this phenomenon was also closely connected to the ancient Olympic Games. At that time, only men were allowed to compete. Athletes were prohibited from wearing clothing, and spectators were encouraged to judge the beauty of the male body. As one of the central religious rituals of ancient Greece, the Olympics exerted immense influence on society as a whole. The repeated public admiration of the nude male form gradually created conditions favorable to the spread of male homosexuality. Female homosexuality also existed. But because women held a relatively low social status in ancient Greece, it did not develop into a widespread movement. When the number of homosexual men in society reached a certain proportion, writers and artists began to exploit and exaggerate the theme to attract audiences. In literary and artistic works from the 5th century BCE, many male gods are portrayed as having at least one male companion, and many heroes likewise appear with male partners at their side. This situation may sound strange, yet it feels familiar when viewed alongside modern society. After the Second World War, Western societies became more open, but homosexuality was still commonly regarded as immoral. Decades later, many countries began to legalize same-sex marriage. Many politicians, even when personally opposed, publicly supported it, due to political pressure and public opinion. Modern writers and artists, much like their counterparts in ancient Greece, have continued to promote and amplify such themes across film literature and popular culture. By comparing these two eras, it becomes clear that the distortion of Greek mythology largely reflects modern ideological perspectives imposed retroactively upon the ancient world, rather than the authentic traditional beliefs of the ancient Greeks themselves. The preservation of any civilization requires adherence to certain moral standards. When those standards collapse, decline becomes inevitable. This reflects the will of the divine, the laws of history, and the deep spiritual longing within the human soul. Cultures saturated with moral corruption and decadence may provide short-lived stimulation, but they do not endure. Ancient Greece entered its golden age during the 5th and 6th centuries BCE, yet that prosperity lasted little more than 100 years. Thereafter, under the influence of various negative ideologies, the civilization gradually declined. On the surface, as human hearts grew darker, cunning was praised as intelligence and honor. while integrity was mocked as foolishness and shame. In this process of moral corruption, internal conflicts multiplied, and constant civil wars weakened the Greek city-states on every front. Ultimately, with the rise of Rome, Greece withdrew from the stage of history in the 2nd century BCE. Of course, what is presented here is only a simplified outline. In reality, the concrete course of history is far more complex. Even a mere listing of the countless major and minor wars unfolding continuously and overlapping across centuries is enough to leave any researcher overwhelmed. When examined from perspectives such as geography, social structure, economic systems, or political conditions, one can certainly identify many external factors that contributed to the decline of ancient Greece. Yet, when all of these elements are traced back to their root, they ultimately converge on a single point: the transformation of the human heart. Throughout human history, there have been countless examples showing that when the human heart becomes corrupted, driven by unchecked desire and distorted thinking, flawed judgments and misguided decisions inevitably follow, leading, in the end, to destruction. Therefore, although ancient Greece appeared on the surface to be defeated by Rome, behind this outcome lies a deeper meaning. Divine order operates according to moral law, and moral decay inevitably leads to ruin. Compared to Greek mythology, Roman mythology contains far fewer strange and intricate narratives, especially in its early stages. In the formative period of ancient Roman civilization, the primordial gods possessed almost no personal experiences. They had no marriages, no offspring, and no detailed personal stories. They were fundamentally different from the Greek gods. Early Roman deities expressed divinity primarily in a static symbolic form, rather than through highly personified behaviors, emotions, and personalities, as seen in Greek mythology. As a result, there are relatively few records of their activities, leaving later generations with limited understanding of Roman mythology. When Rome conquered the territories of ancient Greece, it absorbed nearly the entire legacy of Greek civilization. During this process of cultural integration, the Romans gradually grew accustomed to equating Roman gods with Greek gods. This practice resulted in the same deity being known by two different names, further entangling the mythological system. Over time, as interactions among peoples and cultures continued to deepen, ancient Rome became increasingly influenced by Greek culture and gradually began to create new stories upon that foundation. According to the principle of rise, stability, decline, and collapse, ancient Rome was likewise unable to escape the path of decay. When corrupt ideas not only become social customs, but are even cloaked in religious form, their destructive impact on moral foundations becomes truly alarming. A typical example is the Bacchanalia, a ritual transmitted from Greece to Rome. It rapidly degenerated into a festival centered on drunkenness and sexual excess, yet was still carried out under the name of the divine. Although Roman officials banned the ritual in 186 BCE, it continued to exist secretly for a long time afterward. However, no matter how elegant a name may sound, even when corruption is carried out in the name of the gods, such decay cannot endure. Sooner or later it must face calamity. Events such as the destruction of Pompeii, which many sources have analyzed as a consequence of moral degeneration, stand as clear evidence of this rule. Although this discussion focuses primarily on decline, it must be understood that human culture has always existed with dual aspects: the upright and the distorted, the constructive and the destructive. In later sections, we will examine the positive and luminous aspects of ancient Greek culture. Human civilization itself is a complex mixture, and this blending often makes it difficult for later generations to clearly distinguish between good and evil. Many elements within Greek culture became distorted and exerted genuinely negative influence on humanity. Ancient Greece in its final phase was destroyed by moral decay. Yet the disappearance of Greek states from the historical stage does not mean that Greek culture itself was eradicated. On the contrary, it survived tenaciously, like wild grass, continuing to shape the course of human history down to the present day. History shows that ideas once regarded by the Romans as hostile and worthy of eradication were gradually accepted after Greece's defeat, precisely because of their richness and appeal. Early Christianity viewed Greek thought as heretical, yet at the same time absorbed certain positive elements and integrated them into theological frameworks. After the Reformation, many denominations called for the purification of doctrine and the removal of elements not rooted in Christianity. Yet in reality, these ideas had already become deeply interwoven with culture, art, philosophy, science, and politics, forming a structure that could no longer be easily separated. Even today, they remain closely connected to political systems, economic frameworks, humanistic concepts, and the foundational structures of modern civilization. Some social movements, such as homosexuality, sexual liberation, incest, and other lifestyles, are even traced by certain advocates back to ancient Greece and presented as traditions deserving legal protection. However, a careful reading of classical works passed down from ancient Greece reveals that many scholars and philosophers of that era were deeply dissatisfied with the chaotic state of mythology at the time. Xenophanes, a renowned philosopher and poet of the 6th century BCE, openly opposed the way poets and playwrights freely adapted myths. He believed they were blaspheming the gods and fabricating false stories that insulted divine beings. A century later, through works such as the Republic recorded by Plato as reflections of Socrates' thought, one can also detect a restrained but clear critical stance toward Homer's poetry. Finally, it must be emphasized that what is presented here reflects only the surface of culture as understood through conventional interpretation. Every surface phenomenon has deeper origins and underlying causes. Regarding the true face of history, including details related to periods when humans and gods were believed to coexist, and the many complexities of this multicultural era, there are matters that cannot yet be fully explained, and others that are not appropriate to judge hastily. Perhaps only when the historical mist finally lifts will the full truth of the past be revealed before humanity. The belief systems of ancient Greece were closely connected to mythology, yet they were not entirely the same. This is because systems of belief usually selected only those elements of myth and cultural tradition that carried moral instruction, ethical meaning, and guidance for inner cultivation, and used them to teach people. Strictly speaking, people in that era all believed in the gods. So the modern concept of religion did not truly exist as we understand it today. There was no clear separation between belief, moral order, and spiritual life. Faith was simply part of everyday existence. However, for the sake of clarity and convenience in academic research, later scholars adopted the term religion as a general label to describe these forms of belief. In the process of study, we also often encounter another term, philosophy, as noted by the author in Observing the Transformation of Human Thought. Through a Stage of Art History, Part 2. Ancient Greek philosophy was not a purely theoretical system of abstract knowledge, as modern people often imagine. In reality, it was closer to practices of inner cultivation and spiritual discipline, methods of self-refinement passed down through generations. Some modern scholars have even compared ancient Greek philosophical schools to the spiritual practices taught by Siddhartha Gautama or Lao Tzu. From this perspective, the boundary between ancient philosophy and religion becomes very blurred, and this viewpoint carries genuine academic value. The thought of Pythagoras provides a clear example. Today, Pythagoras is commonly classified as a philosopher, and his ideas are regarded as a philosophical school in the academic sense. Yet within the Pythagorean system are many religious and theological elements, including beliefs about the soul, inner purification, and the order of the cosmos. For this reason, when scholars study ancient Greek religion, the Pythagorean school is often placed closer to the category of religious belief than to philosophy in the modern secular sense. By contrast, Greek myths and legends largely focused on storytelling and entertainment. Ordinary people, limited by human logic and attachment to worldly perspectives, tended to create stories designed to satisfy curiosity and emotional interest. In doing so, writers freely humanized the gods, gave them human traits, and at times even portrayed them as morally corrupt, attributing to them human desires, emotions, and behavior. During that period, some philosophers and certain influential schools were not overly concerned with these groundless fabrications. Their attention was directed more toward inner cultivation and the preservation of core moral values than toward debating stories created for popular entertainment. This distinction can be clearly seen in the inscriptions carved at the entrance to the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. The three famous maxims read, "Know thyself. Nothing in excess and careless oaths bring disaster." These teachings reveal that serious religious belief in ancient Greece emphasized self-restraint, self-awareness, and moral discipline entirely different from exaggerated mythological tales meant to amuse the masses. Nevertheless, it cannot be denied that negative influences also existed in reality. For example, the Eleusinian mystery rites at times required participants to tell obscene jokes or at specific locations to exchange crude and vulgar language with one another. Especially in later periods as public morality deteriorated and social order became increasingly chaotic across different professions and classes, moral corruption grew more severe. Historical records describe widespread sexual immorality at temples dedicated to the goddess of love, places that should have been sacred spaces of reverence. These matters are well documented, and there is no need to elaborate further here. Another important characteristic of ancient Greek belief was its profound reverence for divine revelation, commonly known as oracles. Whether rulers, those in positions of power, or ordinary people, when faced with major events or difficult decisions in life, they would all turn to sacred sites, most often temples dedicated to various gods, to seek guidance. If a prayer was accepted, the god would bestow an oracle. Priests or appointed attendants at the temple would receive, interpret, and convey the divine message, often rendering it into poetic or metrical form before delivering it to the supplicant. According to historical records, the Oracle of Apollo at Delphi was regarded as the most accurate and spiritually efficacious. For this reason, beginning in the 8th century before Christ, the Temple of Delphi became one of the most important religious centers in ancient Greece. During the lifetime of Socrates, the Oracle at Delphi once proclaimed explicitly, "No one is wiser than Socrates." However, this extraordinary declaration stirred jealousy and hostility within society. A chain of events followed in which Socrates was falsely accused of showing disrespect toward the gods and corrupting the youth. Ultimately, after a vote by a jury of 500 citizens, he was sentenced to death. The punishment of righteous or virtuous individuals due to the selfish desires of others is not uncommon in history. One of the most well-known examples in Western tradition is the massacre of the infants ordered by King Herod, as recorded in the Bible. Upon hearing of celestial signs announcing the birth of a new king of the Jews, Herod perceived this as a direct threat to his throne and sent men to search for the child. Those sent were warned by angels and did not return to report to him. Unable to find Jesus, Herod ordered the killing of all male infants under 2 years old in Bethlehem, the birthplace of Christ. Similar stories appear repeatedly throughout both ancient and modern history in both Eastern and Western cultures. Those in power, fearing prophecies concerning the rise of a chosen ruler or king, have resorted to mass killings or twisted interpretations of prophecy to serve personal ambition. Throughout history, even among religious authorities, bishops, abbots, priests, there have been many who were greedy and corrupt despite genuinely believing in the existence of the gods. In China, despite the promotion of atheism, many officials still believe in feng shui and practices labeled as superstition. Yet belief in such things does not make them honest or morally upright. Corruption and moral decay continue alongside such beliefs. All of these examples point to one fundamental truth. If a person does not strive to improve their own morality and inner character, then belief in the existence of God does not automatically make them virtuous. Morality is not something that can be measured simply by belief or disbelief in a particular entity. It encompasses the entire way a person conducts themselves, virtue, values, mindset, emotional state, and behavior throughout life. More precisely, if a person believes in God, yet ignores God's moral requirements for human character and conduct, then such belief exists only in outward form. It may appear sincere, but in essence, it is false, distorted, and cannot be regarded as genuine faith. The ancient sages consistently emphasized moral integrity and inner cultivation. This stands in sharp contrast to modern standards, which often measure human value by external knowledge and technical skill. Take Thales of Miletus, who lived in the 7th century before Christ and was one of the 7 sages of ancient Greece. Modern accounts often describe him merely as an expert in astronomy and geography, a pioneer of the Milesian school, and even call him the father of Western science. In reality, however, Thales' primary purpose was not the development of science in the modern sense, but the moral instruction of society. What he possessed was not merely scientific knowledge, but something closer to prophetic ability. According to histories by Herodotus, Thales accurately predicted a total solar eclipse on May 28, 585 before Christ. Aristotle in Politics also recounts the story of Thales predicting an abundant olive harvest and earning substantial profits by leasing olive presses. Modern explanations often attribute these predictions to advanced scientific knowledge. Yet this raises a reasonable question: how could a man living more than 2,600 years ago, without any scientific instruments and in an era of extremely limited scientific development, make such precise predictions? Rather than forcing these events into a scientific framework, it is more honest to acknowledge their prophetic nature and their purpose in guiding human morality. As Aristotle recounted, although Thales could easily have become wealthy, he chose instead the pursuit of truth. His brief venture into profit was meant to demonstrate one point: philosophers are not poor because they lack ability, but because wealth is not their aim. What Thales demonstrated was not merely personal intelligence or superior powers of reasoning. Behind those precise predictions lay a way of life, humility before the order of the universe, reverence for the unseen laws that govern heaven and earth, and above all, an awareness that human beings are observers within destiny, not its absolute masters. For the ancient Greeks, prophetic abilities of this kind did not exist in isolation. They were understood as gifts granted by the gods, bestowed only upon those who maintained uprightness of heart and restraint in desire. Knowledge in this understanding was never separated from morality. For this reason, when the sages spoke of truth, they were not speaking only of the material world. They were also speaking of the sacred order that stands behind it, an order governed by law, judgment, reward, and consequence, and one that cannot be bent or controlled by human ambition. At the center of that order, the ancient Greeks did not see a god driven by lust or rivalry, as later distorted myths often portray. They saw Zeus, the embodiment of heavenly law, of supreme justice, and of the power that maintains balance between heaven, earth, and humankind. To understand why prophecy was regarded as meaningful, why morality was placed above knowledge, and why corruption inevitably led to destruction, we must step away from the distorted images of mythology and return to the core truth about Zeus, the god whom the ancient Greeks genuinely revered, worshipped, and regarded as the foundation of cosmic order. Zeus, the supreme deity atop Mount Olympus. In the understanding of ancient Greeks, Zeus stood as the king of kings, the ruler of the sky, and all that moves within it: weather storms, thunder, lightning, wind, and clouds. At the same time, he was regarded as the god of law, command, justice, destiny, and humankind itself. He was honored as the father of the gods and the ruler of all things, not merely because of overwhelming power, but because of his role in sustaining the universal order of existence. In ancient art and tradition, Zeus is commonly portrayed as a mature, muscular man with a full beard bearing an expression of calm authority and solemn dignity. This appearance recalls his father Kronos, as well as his brothers Poseidon and Hades. Together, the three were understood as the pillars of the cosmos, each governing a fundamental realm: the sky, the sea, and the underworld. According to ancient Greek tradition, Zeus's power surpassed that of all other gods combined. Because of this, he had no need to constantly display his authority. His very presence was sufficient to establish order, and the other gods clearly understood their limits in relation to the divine law that Zeus embodied. From this perspective, stories about Zeus were never meant merely for entertainment. They functioned as moral teachings conveyed through divine imagery. One of the most representative accounts that illustrates this role is the myth of the Great Flood in ancient Greek mythology. Long ago, as humanity gradually drifted away from fundamental moral standards, the world grew increasingly cruel, greedy, coarse, and irreverent. Justice and law lost their rightful place, and the sacred custom of hospitality slowly faded from human conduct. As reports of this moral decline continued to reach the heavens, Zeus chose to descend into the human world himself, taking on the form of a mortal in order to observe directly. Upon arriving among humankind, Zeus discovered conditions even more severe than what had been described. One night, he entered the palace of Lycaon, king of Arcadia, a ruler infamous for brutality and contempt toward the sacred duty of welcoming guests. Zeus revealed his divine nature through his power. Those who witnessed it fell to their knees in reverence, yet Lycaon responded with mockery, scoffing at their prayers. Seeking to test whether the visitor was truly a god or merely a man, Lycaon devised a cruel act. He murdered an innocent person, boiled part of the flesh, roasted the rest, and served it as a meal to Zeus. Nothing escaped the gaze of the supreme god. Zeus's wrath arose not from personal offense, but from the violation of divine law itself. Rising from the table, he summoned thunder and lightning upon the palace. In an instant, Lycaon was transformed into a wolf, a creature marked by savagery and bloodlust, mirroring the nature that already ruled his heart. After witnessing the depth of humanity's corruption, Zeus returned to Olympus, gathered the gods, and made a decision of complete purification. A great flood would restore order to the world. Zeus commanded the south wind to bring rain. With water-laden wings beating against the earth, dark clouds gathered, thunder roared, and rain poured without ceasing. Crops were destroyed, and the labor of countless people dissolved into the flowing waters. Then the sea god summoned the rivers and ordered them to burst their banks, sweeping away homes, temples, and cities. The land slowly disappeared beneath vast waters until no clear boundary remained between sea and earth. Amid this devastation, humans searched desperately for survival. Mountain peaks, wooden boats, and submerged rooftops became temporary refuges. Animals shared the same fate as forests. Plains and hills vanished beneath the flood. In the region of Parnassus, a mountain with twin peaks rising above the waters, a righteous couple survived, Deucalion and Pyrrha. Known for their integrity and reverence for the gods, they had received a divine warning and prepared a large vessel. When the flood came, that vessel carried them safely to higher ground. From the heavens, Zeus recognized their virtue and reverence. He summoned the north wind to disperse the clouds and clear the sky. The sea god withdrew the raging waters, rivers returned to their courses, and the land gradually re-emerged. From this surviving pair, a new generation of humanity began entering yet another cycle of existence. Over time, moral decline slowly reappeared. The poet Hesiod, a contemporary revered alongside Homer, recorded this sorrow with piercing clarity. He described a generation burdened by suffering. Where fathers and sons turned against one another, friends grew jealous. Elders received no respect. Deceivers prospered, and the upright were trampled. In Hesiod's view, humanity brought its suffering upon itself by turning away from divine law and abandoning moral order. Through these traditions, Zeus emerges not as a capricious deity, but as the embodiment of moral order and supreme justice. Flood punishment and protection all follow a single enduring principle. When humanity upholds virtue, order remains intact. When morality decays, purification inevitably follows. This understanding forms the core truth of Zeus in ancient Greek thought, explaining why the ancients placed morality above power, and why divine law was seen as the axis around which human history turns. But here is the point that invites deeper reflection. What the ancient Greeks entrusted to the figure of Zeus was not a rare exception in human history. When we widen our view beyond Greece, we begin to recognize that the same principle appears again and again across many ancient civilizations. Wherever humanity still held reverence for heaven, moral order stood above raw power. Wherever the law of heaven was honored, social order was preserved. From this shared foundation, an essential question naturally emerges when we speak of ancient cultures: what truly deserves to be called tradition? Tradition and change. When observing many ancient cultures across the world, a natural question arises: what exactly is tradition? Does something become a tradition simply because it has existed for a very long time? When we look back at ancient civilizations, a clear commonality emerges. Many foundational moral codes and core social customs originated from mythology or ancient belief systems. In the East, this appears in creation narratives and the establishment of human relationships and moral order. In the West, it appears in the belief that the gods established laws, justice, and the proper relationships among human beings. These standards were passed down from the earliest stages of human civilization and were regarded as legitimate in orthodox culture. They are often referred to as divinely transmitted culture. Such divinely transmitted cultures were largely established at the beginning of a civilizational cycle, or refined during its early development. Over time, they also passed through the stages of formation, stability, decline, and dissolution. When one civilizational cycle came to an end, a new civilization emerged to replace the old one. Some civilizations ended through great natural catastrophes, leaving humanity and even other life forms nearly erased. Others declined through war or widespread disease, wiping out much of the population. In the latter case, survivors often abandoned most of the previous culture in order to integrate into the new civilization. Yet the culture of the earlier civilization did not disappear entirely. Some elements were absorbed while others were preserved as ruins or historical records. It is precisely here that a critical issue arises. When history reaches a stage of decline, not only does society collapse, but culture itself is damaged as well, including the original divinely transmitted culture. Over many generations, the noble values once established gradually changed and in some cases were completely reversed. Mythological stories that once carried moral meaning and social order were altered, embellished, and transformed into content that became base and corrupt. From that point onward, such content no longer belonged to divinely transmitted culture. Yet this altered culture carries a feature that easily misleads people. It possesses great antiquity. When preserved by later civilizations as ancient heritage, it often appears to have a longer historical presence than the divinely transmitted culture of the newer civilization, because humanity tends to revere what is ancient. Over time, this degeneration comes to be accepted and even affirmed under the name of tradition. This is where the greatest danger lies. For this reason, we must return to the core question: what truly defines tradition? Tradition is not determined by age, but by its divine legitimacy. What originates from the law of heaven and universal moral principles remains tradition regardless of the era in which it appears. Conversely, if something lacks legitimate moral essence, then even if it has been passed down since ancient times, it does not qualify as true tradition. Some things may be described as distorted or degenerate traditions, but they do not belong to the concept of tradition being discussed here. Throughout Western art, across many historical periods, themes drawn from ancient Greece and Rome appear with great frequency. For this reason, in order to provide readers with a foundational understanding, and this discussion has been written in a simplified and balanced manner. The content selects only a few representative stories from a vast cultural current, without attempting comprehensive analysis or exhaustive exploration of every complex factor. The purpose is to allow readers from different backgrounds to engage, reflect, and draw their own connections, while acknowledging that certain limitations are unavoidable. And there is one thread that runs consistently through all the stories just mentioned: the role of the gods in establishing order, upholding moral principles, and guiding the destiny of civilizations. When order on earth is closely aligned with heavenly law, each god represents more than a force of nature. Each embodies a deeper principle that shapes the course of human history. And if Zeus stands as the symbol of heavenly law and supreme justice, then within the ancient Greek world, there exists another power, one intimately bound to life, prosperity, and also the destruction of coastal civilizations. From this point, the narrative naturally leads us to Poseidon, the god of the sea in Greek mythology. Poseidon, the god of the sea in Greek mythology. According to ancient Greek tradition, Poseidon was the son of the Titan Cronus and the goddess Rhea. From the moment of his birth, he shared the fate of many of the next generation of gods and was swallowed by his father. When the age of the Titans came to its end, Poseidon was freed and joined his two brothers Zeus and Hades in the great struggle to restore cosmic order. After the overthrow of Cronus, the three brothers divided authority among themselves. Zeus took dominion over the sky. Hades ruled the world beneath the earth, and Poseidon received the sea and all realms of water. From that moment on, Poseidon became the lord of the oceans, rivers, earthquakes, and the forces bound to water. In the understanding of the ancient Greeks, his power ranked second only to Zeus, for the sea both sustains life and holds the capacity to erase entire civilizations. Poseidon's weapon was the trident, a symbol of absolute authority over water. Whenever he struck the earth with it, the ground trembled, the seas rose into fury, and the balance of nature shifted. Poseidon was not only the god of the visible ocean, but also the embodiment of the deep, uncontrollable forces of nature and of the human soul itself. Poseidon in the kingdom of Atlantis. According to the writings of Plato, Poseidon was the divine founder of Atlantis. The tradition tells that on a remote island in the open ocean, Poseidon encountered a mortal woman who had lost both of her parents. He took her as his wife, and together they had 5 pairs of twin sons, 10 sons in total. Poseidon divided the island into 10 regions and appointed each son to govern one portion of the land. The eldest son, named Atlas, became the supreme king, and from his name the island came to be known as Atlantis, the land of Atlas. Atlantis was described as a civilization far beyond ordinary imagination. Its land was fertile, its resources abundant, and gold and silver appeared in great quantities. Palaces were built of red, black, and golden stone. Walls were overlaid with precious metals, and the inner sanctuaries shone with brilliance. Its harbors and ships were fully developed, and its advanced techniques even allowed human beings to travel through the air. The influence of Atlantis extended far beyond a single region, reaching across Europe and into Africa. Yet alongside prosperity, Atlantis gradually drifted away from its original moral foundations. As human hearts changed, disaster followed. Violent earthquakes and a great flood struck, and the entire kingdom was swallowed in a short span of time. Atlantis vanished, becoming a place where ships could no longer reach. Because of this sudden and mysterious disappearance, later generations have long carried a quiet but persistent desire to rediscover the traces of the lost civilization of Atlantis. From this longing, 3 major theories gradually emerged. Some believe Atlantis sank deep beneath the ocean. Others believe it became part of a continent through massive geological movements. And still others argue that Atlantis was in fact Antarctica. Among these theories, the continental hypothesis has drawn particular attention, especially through its association with a strange geological structure known as the Eye of the Sahara, located in Mauritania. When compared with Plato's descriptions, a series of similarities appears difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Plato described Atlantis as having concentric circular rings, with the central area serving as the political, religious, and cultural heart, while the outer rings housed the population. Viewed from above, this structure closely resembles the form of the Eye of the Sahara. The resemblance becomes even more striking when size is considered. Plato recorded the diameter of Atlantis as approximately 23.5 kilometers. The most prominent central ring of the Eye of the Sahara measures almost exactly the same, about 23.5 kilometers. Plato also described green mountains to the north and the sea to the south. Although the southern side of the Eye of the Sahara is now dry desert, the landforms show clear evidence of extensive water erosion in the past. These questions are further reinforced by recent archaeological surveys that have uncovered marine fossils around the Eye of the Sahara. Marine fossils have even been found in stones used to build pyramids in the eastern Sahara. Such discoveries suggest that the region surrounding the Eye of the Sahara was once covered by the sea, and that the waters later receded, leaving behind the eroded structure visible today. From here, the narrative naturally turns to climate resources and the memory of a vanished civilization. Plato described Atlantis as a fertile land where crops and fruit flourished. Modern climate research confirms that the Sahara was not always a desert. Between roughly 11,000 and 5,000 years ago, it was a green region with rivers, lakes, and vast grasslands. An ancient river system once flowed through this area, and at its peak, its scale may have rivaled some of the largest rivers in the world today. Mauritania, home to the Eye of the Sahara, is also one of Africa's major mineral-producing countries. Gold, silver, iron, and copper are all present there, strikingly consistent with Plato's account of Atlantis' wealth. In addition, stones colored red, black, and gold have been found near the site, matching the building materials described in ancient texts. Plato also recorded the presence of elephants in Atlantis. Although large elephants no longer inhabit Mauritania, paleontological evidence shows that the region once supported elephant populations in the distant past, aligning with Plato's broader description. From geography and resources, the story continues toward names and lingering legends. According to local tradition in Mauritania, the first king of the region was named Atlas, matching the name of Poseidon's eldest son in the Atlantis legend. Moreover, an ancient map reconstructed from the writings of Herodotus places Atlantis in what is now Mauritania, with a mountain range to the north known as the Atlas Mountains. This chain of correspondences has led many supporters of the continental theory to believe that the Eye of the Sahara is the remnant of Atlantis. Yet, one major question remains unresolved. If Atlantis was once an island in the ocean, how did it become part of the African continent? From this question arises another hypothesis. Some scholars suggest that after the catastrophe, the people of Atlantis were not entirely destroyed. Survivors scattered across the world, carrying with them advanced metallurgical knowledge and technologies of their former civilization. Among these forms of knowledge, orichalcum, the legendary metal, has become a central clue. For this reason, the search for orichalcum has long been a persistent effort among those who believe in the historical reality of Atlantis. This line of thought does not end in the Sahara, but extends to other puzzling discoveries in human history. In 1973 in Romania, during excavation work along the Mureș River, a strange metallic object was found beside ancient animal fossils. This object, later known as the Aeud wedge, contains an unusually high concentration of aluminum combined with a complex alloy, and was discovered in soil dated to approximately 250,000 years old. Pure aluminum requires advanced metallurgical techniques. Yet modern history records the first successful extraction of aluminum only in the 19th century. The presence of such an object raises profound questions about the possible existence of prehistoric civilizations with capabilities far beyond conventional understanding. Although no final conclusion has yet been reached, the appearance of artifacts like this continues to remind modern humanity that our history may have passed through far more cycles of rise and collapse than we were ever taught, and that the memory of lost civilizations may still be quietly waiting to be recognized. Was that destruction merely the result of random natural disasters? Or did it follow warnings recorded far earlier, preserved in the form of stories that later generations came to call mythology? In the memory of ancient Greece, there exists such a legend. It does not speak of the sea or a great flood, but of the sky of the sun, and of a moment when the order of the cosmos nearly unraveled because human ambition crossed its proper bounds. The legend of Phaethon and the chariot of the sun, what do pride and curiosity lead to? Within the heritage of Greek mythology, one story has been passed down as a quiet yet enduring warning about the boundary between humanity and the divine. From unrestrained pride and curiosity alone, the young man Phaethon brought calamity across the earth, shaking the stable order that once governed both the mortal world and Mount Olympus. Phaethon carried divine blood as the son of the sun god Phoebus. Yet that lineage offered no protection from a tragic fate. In the ancient Greek understanding of the universe, ancestry never stood above moral order, and power never preceded inner maturity. From early childhood, Phaethon was repeatedly reminded by his mother Clymene of his sacred origin. In her telling, Phoebus was not only the sun god, but also Phaethon's true father. These stories, repeated year after year, planted in the boy's heart a deep conviction about who he was meant to be. Yet beyond the walls of that home, other children did not share that belief. They mocked Phaethon, treating his mother's words as nothing more than comfort offered to a naive child. Their repeated ridicule gradually carved into his young mind, leaving him wounded and filled with quiet resentment. One day, those emotions could no longer remain contained. Phaethon confronted his mother and demanded that she prove the truth of everything she had told him. For Clymene, this moment carried not only the pain of a mother being doubted, but also the weight of a sacred oath she had long held within her heart. Overcome with emotion, Clymene swore before the gods that if her words were false, her eyes would forever lose the ability to see the light. In that very moment, she urged Phaethon to journey to the palace of the sun god himself, where truth would stand revealed beneath the most sacred light of all. Carrying both excitement and an overwhelming inner drive, Phaethon began his journey eastward. He crossed Ethiopia, passed through the lands of ancient India, and traveled across barren deserts where the sun scorched the earth without mercy. With every step closer to the palace of the sun, he moved farther from the familiar world of mortals. When Phaethon finally arrived at the dwelling of Phoebus, the sight before him exceeded all imagination. The palace of the sun blazed with pillars of gold reflecting eternal fire. Its domes were adorned with finely carved ivory, and its massive doors of pure silver radiated a cold yet pristine light. Across the reliefs carved into its walls, the universe appeared in perfect order, with Earth at its center surrounded by the constellations that had guided humanity for countless generations. Everything present obeyed a harmonious design where each planet and each star followed its appointed course. Below upon the earth, humanity continued its daily life alongside demigods and spirits dwelling within the visible world. Across the seas, Poseidon observed his living realm amid the endlessly moving waves. And atop Mount Olympus, where the gods gathered authority and law, remained preserved in solemn majesty. It was within this very setting that Phaethon's story began to turn toward another path. From the moment he stepped into the palace of the sun, the fate of not only Phaethon himself, but of the entire earth, quietly approached a trial unlike any before. When Phaethon climbed to the highest point of the palace, he immediately encountered his father, the sun god Phoebus. Seated beside him were the divine beings who governed day, month, year, and century. Spring wore a garland upon her head. Summer lay bare-chested in rest. Autumn appeared stained with grape juice. Winter stood apart, marked by pale hair and a cold demeanor. Unable to approach his father because of the overwhelming radiance, Phaethon stopped at a distance and spoke with reverence. "O light of the world, Lord Phoebus, my father, if you allow me to use that word, if my mother Clymene has spoken no falsehood, then grant me a sign. Give me proof that I am truly your son, so that the doubts within my heart may be erased." Upon hearing Phaethon's plea, Phoebus removed his blazing crown of sunlight so that his son could come nearer. Stroking Phaethon's head, the sun god spoke, "You are indeed my son, and Clymene has spoken only the truth. Ask for whatever you wish, and I shall grant it to you. Let the sacred river Styx, by which the gods swear, bear witness to my promise." Thus, as soon as he sat beside his father, Phaethon conceived a reckless desire. He wished to drive the chariot of the sun. Regret immediately followed the oath he had spoken. The sun god shook his head again and again and said, "Your request is made in haste. I wish I could withdraw my promise. I must tell you plainly that this is the one thing I would refuse you for your own sake. Phaethon, you have asked for something far beyond your strength. Your destiny is to live as a mortal, yet you have asked for what does not belong to mortals. You desire what even the gods themselves do not wish to share. Though the gods may grant favors to one another within certain bounds, no one but I possesses the power to guide the chariot of the sun. Even the Lord of Olympus himself, Jupiter, with all his fearful thunder, cannot control it. If you could see my heart, the heart of a father, you would look across the world and ask for anything else, whether in the sky, the sea, or upon the land. I would deny you nothing. To ride the sun's chariot is not a gift. It is a punishment. Phaethon, do you truly wish to receive it? Why do you place me in such anguish? Still doubt nothing I have sworn by the river Styx. But be wiser. Despite his father's earnest warnings, Phaethon remained consumed by his desire to drive the chariot of the sun. And because he possessed the right to demand what had been sworn, Phoebus allowed his son's wish to be fulfilled. The radiant golden chariot was brought forth along with the powerful and untamed divine horses. As Phaethon stood in awe of the magnificent creation, the dawn goddess awoke and lifted the veil of night so that sunlight might spread across the world. The stars faded away, yielding to the deep blue sky, anointing his son with a divine ointment to protect him from the burning heat. Phoebus offered his final instruction. "If you can still heed your father's words, my boy, hold the reins tightly. The horses know their appointed path. Do not loosen your grip. You must remain between heaven and earth, neither scorching the land below, nor carrying destructive fire toward the heavens. I entrust you to the goddess of fortune, and I pray she will watch over you." Phaethon proudly took the reins of the sun's chariot from his father's hands and drove it out from the radiant palace. At once, the divine horses sensed how light the chariot had become. Freed from the familiar weight of Phoebus, they surged forward with unnatural eagerness. They carried the sun's chariot faster than ever before. Fear seized Phaethon as he realized he could no longer control its course. His face turned pale as he struggled to pull the reins. Yet all he could do was wish he had not acted so rashly. In that moment, he longed only to be the son of an ordinary man. The sun's chariot spun completely out of control, the horses racing according to their own will. For the first time, the constellation of the Great Bear felt such unbearable heat that it fled. The Scorpion constellation lashed out fiercely at the uninvited intruder. The moon goddess looked on in astonishment as the chariot of her brother passed far beneath her realm, causing even the clouds to vanish under the intense heat. As the chariot descended too low, the earth ignited and vegetation was burned away. Human cities were destroyed under the overwhelming heat, and living creatures turned to ash. The mountains, Athos Taurus, Tmolus Oete, and Ida, once surrounded by flowing springs, were reduced to barren hills. Even Mount Olympus, the dwelling place of the gods, suffered grave devastation. At that moment, Jupiter, father of the gods, ascended to the highest heights of the heavens, the place where clouds are formed across the earth, where thunder roars. There he summoned all the gods and, above all, Phoebus, who had placed the sun's chariot into mortal hands. Jupiter hurled a powerful bolt of lightning at the divine chariot, stunning the horses, destroying the sun's chariot, and ending the life of the young Phaethon. The body of the unfortunate youth fell into a distant region of the world, the realm of the river god Eridanus. There the river deities laid him to rest. Phaethon, the young man betrayed by the weakness of his own heart. This story is drawn from Metamorphoses by the ancient Roman poet Ovid, translated by Anthony S. Klein. Roman religious belief shares many similarities with Greek tradition. In Greek mythology, the sun god is known as Helios, or the light god Apollo, rather than Phoebus. Likewise, the father of the gods in Greek mythology is Zeus, rather than Jupiter as he is known in Roman belief. Thus, it becomes clear that power here does not refer only to supernatural strength. It also encompasses authority, capability, elevated position, heavy responsibility, or anything that exceeds what a person is truly ready to carry. In the story of Phaethon, he did not lack divine lineage, but he lacked the inner maturity required to guide the chariot of the sun. As a result, that power did not bring glory. It brought catastrophe. And the chariot of the sun itself, which governs the order of the cosmos, reminds us of a lasting truth: power holds meaning only when it is joined with humility, self-control, and inner maturity. Heracles, the mighty demigod of ancient Greek mythology. In ancient Greek mythology, Heracles stands as a figure in whom extraordinary strength and a harsh destiny converge. When his story passed into Roman tradition, he became known as Hercules, and that name was later given to a bright constellation in the night sky, serving as an enduring mark of the demigod's thunderous deeds, celebrated in every direction of the known world. As the son of the god Zeus, Heracles carried a calling far beyond the ordinary human condition, from the very moment of his birth. His life was shaped not only by personal trials, but by responsibilities bound to the fate of Mount Olympus itself and to the order of the entire divine realm. According to ancient prophecies, Heracles was born to become one of the pillars defending Olympus against the threat of the Gigantes, colossal beings born from Mother Earth Gaia, bearing the primal fury of the world itself. High upon Mount Olympus, within the magnificent palace of the gods, Zeus sat in deep contemplations upon a massive throne carved from rare cedar wood, its surface inlaid with ivory gold and glittering gemstones. One hand supported his chin, his elbow resting lightly on the arm of the throne. Locks of pure white hair curled softly and fell along his cheeks, nearly blending into the silver beard that covered the lower half of his face, leaving only a broad, resolute mouth exposed. The expression suggested authority beyond challenge. Upon a face sculpted like marble with a straight nose and a wide brow, Zeus's eyes shone clear as crystal deep blue, like the waters of the Aegean Sea. That gaze, which often caused even the gods to tread carefully, now carried the quiet gravity of a ruler contemplating the destiny that lay ahead. Seated beside Zeus was a handsome young god with a neatly trimmed beard and a strong yet balanced build, radiating agility and alertness. His steel-gray eyes reflected sharp intelligence like a window briefly opened onto an ocean of schemes and insights within his mind. Upon his head rested a wide-brimmed cap made of goatskin, and on his feet were winged sandals that carried him effortlessly through space. Beside him stood a golden staff entwined with two serpents crowned above them with a pair of golden wings, a symbol of messages and movement. In his hands he held a lyre, its frame crafted from spruce wood and inlaid with mother-of-pearl and precious stones. Slender fingers gently held a plectrum made from a fish scale brushing lightly across amber-colored strings. The sound that arose was pure and warm, flowing like waterlight as a passing breeze, and it echoed throughout Zeus's palace atop Mount Olympus. This was Hermes the messenger, godson of Zeus, and the goddess Maia, embodiment of intellect, adaptability, and the orderly passage between realms. The two gods sat within a palace built of glowing red bronze and radiant gold. Towering columns supported the vaulted ceiling upon which reliefs depicted the entire course of the cosmos, from the moment of creation to the 10-year war between the Olympian gods and the Titans. This majestic palace rested beneath a vast, luminous sky crowning Mount Olympus, where eternal spring reigned. The sunlight there felt soft as velvet, sweet as honey, carrying a gentle warmth that never harmed the flawless skin of the gods, unlike the harsh sun of the mortal world below. In the stillness, Zeus's voice rang out deep and resonant, like the first thunder of spring filling the palace. "Wise Hermes, my son, do you remember the war we fought against the Titans?" Hermes calmly set his lyre aside and replied with solemn respect. "My lord Zeus, shaper of thunder and ruler of the gods. How could I forget that 10-year conflict which shook both heaven and earth? We prevailed, the Titans were cast into the depths of Tartarus, and Atlas was condemned to bear the sky as his eternal punishment. Yet the world itself was left in ruin, and we labored greatly to restore order. I cannot imagine what would become of the gods and humankind if such devastation were to unfold again." Zeus's gaze grew deeper, as though piercing the veil of time itself. "That is precisely what weighs upon my thoughts. The Fates once delivered a prophecy that Olympus would again face invasion, this time by the Gigantes. Born from the earth, towering like mountains, they possess strength capable of overturning rivers and seas, power that even surpasses that of the Titans of old." In that moment, the air atop Olympus grew heavy. From here on, the destiny of Heracles, the demigod bearing the blood of Zeus, quietly moved toward the center of a great trial, where physical strength alone would not suffice, and where endurance, will, and the spirit of atonement would guide him toward the path of a true hero. Under the quiet stillness of Mount Olympus, Hermes stood lost in thought. With just a fleeting glance, he understood exactly where his father Zeus's mind was headed. The prophecies spoken by the Fates were never uttered by chance. Whenever their voices were heard, it was always a sign that the wheel of destiny had begun to turn, drawing both the world of the gods and the realm of humankind toward a point of no return. Hermes spoke slowly, his voice calm yet resolute. He recalled what the fates themselves had once declared: the Gigantes could only be defeated if they were struck at the same moment by a god and a mortal. This meant that alongside the power of Olympus, strength from the human world was required. And clearly Zeus was searching for that very person. Zeus looked at Hermes with quiet satisfaction. Among all his sons, Hermes was the one who inspired him with the greatest confidence, not only because of his sharp intelligence, but because of his ability to perceive the essence of any matter. Zeus acknowledged that an ordinary human would never be strong enough to face the ferocious Gigantes. The chosen one had to carry his blood. Zeus had many sons, yet most of them were gods born of divine mothers. Only Perseus, his son by a mortal woman, had once fulfilled that rare condition. Perseus had been a great hero, the slayer of Medusa with her serpent hair, the conqueror of the sea monster, Cetus sent by Poseidon, and a warrior who had stood alongside the gods in moments of grave peril. But Perseus had completed the fate allotted to mortals and passed from the world. Meanwhile, the prophecy of the fates was drawing ever closer to its fulfillment. Hermes gently continued, reminding Zeus that the bloodline of Perseus still remained upon the earth. Zeus narrowed his eyes, deep and discerning. He knew Hermes had not yet finished the story. With his winged sandals, Hermes had traveled every corner of the mortal world and even descended into Tartarus itself. From the moment he lay in the cradle, Hermes had displayed uncommon cleverness. He had once stolen Apollo's cattle so skillfully that even the god of light could not trace them. And it was Hermes' own creation, the lyre, that eventually enchanted Apollo so completely that he willingly traded the entire herd just to possess the instrument. Zeus gave a slight nod, signaling Hermes to go on. Hermes recounted the lineage of Perseus. Perseus had a son named Electryon, who ruled as king of Mycenae. In a war for territory against the Telebones, the sons of King Pterelaus, all 8 of Electryon's sons, were slain, and his vast herds were carried off. Electryon was left with only one son, Lycymnius, and a single daughter, Alcmene. To recover his stolen cattle, he promised Alcmene in marriage to whoever could accomplish the task. Amphitryon, son of King Alcaeus of Tiryns, a warrior both brave and resourceful, managed to return the cattle without shedding blood. Yet in the chaos that followed, Electryon lost his life in a tragic accident. Amphitryon was forced to flee Mycenae with Alcmene and seek refuge in Thebes. There, after slaying a monstrous fox that had plagued King Creon, Amphitryon was granted an army to wage war against the island of Taphos, once ruled by Pterelaus, as an act of restitution for past losses. And now Amphitryon was absent from home. Zeus quietly confirmed that Perseus had only one granddaughter left, Alcmene. Hermes bowed his head in affirmation. For Zeus, all that needed to be known was now clear. A child carrying his blood would be born a new life, destined to confront the Gigantes. Yet what weighed on Zeus's mind was not the giants themselves, but Hera, his lawful wife, the goddess bound to power marriage and the order of Olympus. Once Hera's jealousy was stirred, every plan could be overturned. Hermes watched the subtle changes on Zeus's face and was reminded of the tale of Io. When Zeus loved Io, daughter of the river god, Inachus Hera discovered the affair, and Zeus transformed Io into a white cow. Hera, discerning the truth, asked Zeus to give her the cow and placed Argus of the 100 Eyes to guard her. And it was Hermes himself who, by Zeus's command, had used cunning and guile to lull all 100 of Argus's eyes to sleep and free Io. Hermes understood Zeus to be a just and noble god, yet one whose heart remained vulnerable to affection. In that moment, Hermes's thoughts drifted beyond Olympus itself. Might there exist realms beyond this sky, higher, purer heavens, where even more perfect gods dwelled, surpassing Zeus himself? As Hermes requested permission to descend to the mortal world and set the next links of fate into motion, Zeus wasted no time. He transformed himself into Amphitryon, Alcmene's husband, and went to her. Their union lasted 3 days, for Zeus had commanded Helios, the sun god, to delay the coming of dawn. Days later, the true Amphitryon returned and was stunned to find Alcmene showing no joy at their reunion. She recounted in vivid detail the events of the campaign he had supposedly just fought. Silent anguish filled Amphitryon's heart. He believed separation had led Alcmene to betray him, and a severe punishment was prepared. But as the funeral pyre was lit, Zeus sent down a sudden rainstorm that extinguished the flames. Amphitryon stood in shock. The blind prophet Tiresias appeared and soothed him with profound words concerning the will of the gods. Amphitryon was reassured and took Alcmene as his wife. Soon after she conceived. That was the story on Earth. On Olympus, contrary to Zeus's expectations, Hera reacted with delight upon hearing the news. She summoned the gods and solemnly proclaimed that a descendant of Perseus was about to be born, a lineage worthy of divine protection as a reward for the glory Perseus had earned by slaying Medusa. Hera called upon Zeus to grant the child a blessing befitting such honor. Zeus looked upon Hera. Her face shone with joy, her eyes bright and tender, as though she herself were about to give birth. Zeus felt quietly pleased, believing the child would be sheltered by the very goddess who governed marriage and childbirth. For a brief instant, Zeus noticed the goddess Ate, embodiment of delusion, standing just behind Hera. Her expression unsettled, her movements restless and uneasy. But his rising happiness kept him from dwelling on the sight. And from that very moment, so seemingly harmonious, a chain of severe trials began to be woven in silence, opening the path of a harsh destiny for Heracles, the demigod, soon to be born. Zeus raised his hand, signaling the gods to listen to his decree. O Hera of the cow-like eyes and snow-white arms, never before have I heard words from you so wise, so sincere, and so just. You have spoken exactly what lies within my own heart. Yes, I shall grant that the child of Perseus's line, when grown, will become a mighty king, one who will bring all the lands of sacred Greece back under his rule. Hera replied softly, O Zeus, gatherer of clouds and wielder of thunder, I cannot simply take your words on faith. So many promises you have made to me in the past, and yet they were left unfulfilled. If you truly cherish this child of Perseus's lineage, and wish to bestow upon him a blessing worthy of his forefathers, then I ask you to act exactly as you have proclaimed. Zeus spoke with solemn authority. O gods of Mount Olympus, today I declare that whichever child of Perseus's bloodline is born first shall have the right to rule over Greece. I swear this oath upon the river Styx. The goddess Eris, radiant-winged and guardian of the river Styx in the underworld of Hades, placed before Zeus a cup filled with the waters of Styx. This was the most sacred oath among the gods. Any god who violated a vow sworn upon the Styx would be forbidden to partake of ambrosia for 1 year, condemned instead to a year-long slumber, and would be barred from all divine councils for 9 full years. Even Zeus, the supreme god, was bound by this law. When the assembly ended, Hera immediately departed Olympus and flew down to the city of Mycenae, where Sthenelus, son of Perseus, and his wife Nisipe resided. Nisipe was 7 months pregnant. With Hera's aid, Nisipe went into labor at once and gave birth to Eurystheus, the grandson of Perseus. Only afterward did Alcmene give birth to twin boys whom she named Alcides and Iphicles. Hera then hurried back to Olympus. Upon Hera's return, a grand banquet was already underway in the heavens. In the heart of the golden halls of Olympus, the gods reveled in song and dance. To the swelling music, the Charities and the Muses, clothed in long gowns sweeping the floor red as flame, and sparkling like the night stars, moved with graceful hands and flowing turns parting and rejoining in perfect rhythm like a flock of flamingos in dance. At times, Hermes would strike up a gentle melody accompanying his elder brother Apollo, whose voice clear as silver rose in hymns praising Zeus and the celestial realm. Beneath tables laden with sumptuous delicacies, Hebe, daughter of Zeus and Hera, along with the youth Ganymede, poured wine for the gods. This was no ordinary wine, but sacred nectar granting eternal youth and unending joy to those who drank it. Now and then, the lame god Hephaestus, the most skillful of divine smiths, would assist Hebe and Ganymede, cracking dry jokes with his prematurely aged, solemn face, causing the gods to burst into laughter. Though unspoken, it seemed that every god understood the true reason for the feast. They rejoiced because Olympus was to be saved by the birth of a child of Perseus's house, whom they knew in truth to be the son of Zeus. Hera, radiant and flowing in a long white gown, lifted her head proudly as she glided past the golden and bronze columns of Olympus and approached the throne where Zeus sat. Zeus, holding a dark red goblet of luminous jade, raised it to toast the gods below. When he saw Hera, he rose eagerly, descended from the throne, inclined his head, took her hand and led her up beside him, saying, "O Hera, my noble wife, you must be weary. I trust that Perseus's household has been blessed with a safe birth under your care. Soon Greece shall have a hero, a mighty king worthy to inherit Perseus's legacy, perhaps even surpassing it in glory." Hera gazed intently at Zeus, who now looked thoroughly satisfied. She raised her white arm, signaling her wish to speak. The gods fell silent. Hera declared, "O mighty Zeus and all you gods, on this very night, 3 children of 2 families of Perseus's house have been born. And the child born first is Eurystheus, son of Sthenelus, and Æscipy, grandson of Perseus. Thus, by Zeus's own decree, Eurystheus shall become the mighty king of Greece." She turned to look at Zeus, who stood stunned, thinking to himself, "Alas, Hera has surprised me twice now." I believed she had set aside her pride and jealousy for the greater good of Olympus. I never imagined she remained the same jealous Hera. She governs childbirth, arranging early or late births is no difficulty for her at all. And why did I not consider that Perseus had other sons, other descendants? Why did I not declare outright that Alcmene's child was my son, born to bear the destiny of saving Olympus? Perhaps I feared Hera's opposition. I was too joyful, and in my joy, I became careless. The fault is mine. I was deceived. Where is Ate? Zeus cast an angry gaze toward the center of the hall, searching for Ate, who stood there absent-mindedly scratching her head, her face eternally confused. Zeus's fury grew so great that his bronze-hued face turned pale as his beard, which trembled as his voice shook all of Olympus. "Ate, goddess of delusion, be gone at once to the mortal world. You are no longer worthy to appear among or interfere with the gods of Olympus. Never let me or any Olympian set eyes upon you again." Then he turned to Hera, who stood quietly savoring her triumph. "And you, Hera, you have shown no sense of proportion. I thought you had changed. Do you realize what you have done to the fate of Olympus and to humankind? I have wronged you before, but this time you are the one who has erred gravely so." He then declared coldly, "The banquet is over." With those words, Zeus swept his robe aside and turned away into his inner chambers, leaving Hera and the gods standing in stunned silence. The others lingered, briefly exchanging hushed whispers before quietly departing. Who would dare disobey a word spoken by Zeus? As the people later described it, suddenly the revels scattered apart. The crowd withdrew in silence, heavy of heart. Hera had overturned Zeus's design, setting in motion the future sufferings of the hero Heracles. Why was Alcides later renamed Heracles? What deadly dangers did Heracles face while still in the cradle? How turbulent and extraordinary was the youth of Heracles? On the heights of Olympus, Hermes walked slowly through a realm flooded with light. That morning, Zeus had entrusted him with a task that weighed heavily on his mind. The Hermes of earlier days would have welcomed it as an exhilarating adventure. But time had refined him. It had taught him to think more deeply, to act with greater restraint, and to consider carefully the consequences of every step he took. Even so, the reputation of Hermes as the master thief still echoed across both the mortal world and the courts of heaven. And it was precisely this skill, this unmatched cleverness, that Zeus now relied upon, placing his trust in his son once again. The task itself seemed simple enough. Hermes needed only to carry Alcide, one of the twin sons born to Alcmene, up to Olympus so that the child might drink the sacred milk of Hera. That divine nourishment carried godly power, laying the foundation for immortality and extraordinary strength gifts Alcide would need one day to confront the Gigantos. Only by receiving this blessing could Alcide's destiny rise to the stature of a true hero. A faint smile touched Hermes' lips as memories of his own youth returned. He recalled his childhood mischief, the clever pranks that had once sent ripples of confusion through Olympus itself. From Apollo's cattle to Zeus's golden scepter to Poseidon's trident and the weapons of Ares, no symbol of power had ever escaped Hermes' curiosity. Each prank ended with a stolen object returned unharmed, accompanied by Hermes' innocent smile, a charm that gradually softened the gods to his playful ways. From those early exploits, Hermes had matured, learning to wield intelligence rather than impulse. This time, however, the situation carried a different weight. Hera's jealousy hung over Olympus like a dense mist. Bringing Alcide close to her, even for the sake of the sacred milk, meant brushing against the pride of the goddess, whose authority stood just beneath Zeus himself. Hermes understood the gravity of her position all too well. After a moment of reflection, he placed the fate of Olympus and the mortal world above his own concerns. With his winged sandals, Hermes trusted that he could always retreat safely and return once harmony had been restored. His resolve firm, Hermes slipped on his winged sandals and descended swiftly to the mortal realm, heading for the palace of Amphitryon. A single gentle touch of his divine staff was enough to send Alcmene and the nurses watching over the twins into a deep sleep. Hermes lifted Alcide into his arms, and in an instant, the two were already on their way back to Olympus. Meanwhile, Hera sat before her shining mirror, slowly arranging her appearance. The reflection revealed a beauty untouched by time, dark hair like polished onyx, framing skin pale, and smooth lips naturally red as sunset, and eyes that shimmered like newly born stars. Within that pride, a quiet bitterness stirred. Hera realized that through countless ages, beauty and power had remained at her side. Yet her heart still bore the subtle marks left by love and betrayal. Memories of Zeus's past affairs surfaced one by one, each awakening the fierce jealousy she had once struggled to contain. Hera felt the force of envy within herself, a presence that rose whenever she faced a rival. At the same time, she recognized Zeus's wandering nature as a power of its own, drawing him endlessly toward new affections. This time, however, something felt different. Hera sensed in Zeus's actions a vision that reached beyond personal desire toward a shared destiny. She exhaled softly and sat down upon her bed, allowing her thoughts to settle. A gentle, soothing melody seemed to fill the air, inviting calm and reflection. In that moment, Hera made a silent decision. She chose to place the order of Olympus and the fate of the world above her private wounds, willing to extend her protection to the child born for a greater purpose. And from that decision, the journey of Alcide, who would one day be known as Heracles, entered a new chapter. A chapter where strength trial and inner growth would intertwine, guiding the future hero through trials that would shake both gods and mortals alike. After Hera decided to reconcile with Zeus and help the newborn child of her husband fulfill his destined mission, she slowly drifted into sleep. A swift shadow slipped quietly into Hera's bedchamber, carrying something in its arms. With great care, the figure placed it gently at the foot of the bed. It was Hermes and the infant Alcide. The baby was plump, rosy, and beautiful, though noticeably quieter than other children his age. He was hungry, and the most natural nourishment lay right before him. Alcide clumsily crawled forward and nestled against Hera's body as though resting in a mother's embrace. His eyes fluttered half-closed as he dreamily drank in the endless sweetness of the divine milk from the goddess who watched over marriage, childbirth, and the care of children. Hera remained asleep. Hermes had played his flute music so soothing that even Argus, the 100-eyed giant, would have closed every eye and fallen into slumber. Thus Hermes had not used his divine staff. Yet perhaps he had grown a little careless. Had he used it, Hera would have slept as deeply as death itself. The weight upon her chest, however, stirred Hera awake. She opened her eyes and stared at the ravenous infant clinging to her drawing in her precious milk. In an instant, she understood Zeus's design. With a sharp motion, Hera flung Alcide away toward the edge of the bed. Alcide had nearly finished feeding. He did not cry. He only stared wide-eyed at Hera as the white liquid sprayed across the heavens, forming a vast river of milky light. In later ages, mortals would call it the Milky Way. Hermes rushed forward, gathered Alcide into his arms, and vanished in a flash, leaving Hera alone with her wounded pride, the humiliation of a queen betrayed. When Hermes returned to Amphitryon's palace, everyone still lay in deep sleep. He placed Alcide back into the cradle beside his twin brother Iphicles, then swiftly reversed his staff and pointed it toward Alcmene and the nurses. Before departing, Hermes briefly delivered Zeus's decree. From this day forward, the child would no longer be called Alcide, the strong hero, but Heracles, meaning the glory of Hera. All present understood that Hermes spoke as Zeus's divine envoy and voice of Olympus, and they listened with reverence, though the reason behind the decree remained unclear to them. The next day at noon, the gentle and beautiful Alcmene had just finished nursing the two boys Heracles and Iphicles. She gazed lovingly at the twin infants, now 10 months old. Though they were twins, they looked nothing alike. Iphicles grew as a healthy, ordinary child, but Alcmene had never seen a baby quite like Heracles. Compared to his brother, Heracles was quieter and never cried. He was extraordinarily strong and grew at an astonishing pace. Alcmene often struggled to keep him settled in his cradle, for he constantly tried to crawl out and explore the world. In his clear blue eyes seemed to rest a hidden resolve, the spirit of a future warrior. "Sleep well, my little angels," Alcmene whispered, stepping out of the room. It was time for midday duties. No sooner had she left than a soft hissing sound rose from beneath the bed. Two triangular heads emerged, those of a pair of king cobras, each as thick as Heracles' wrist. Their heads lifted high, eyes fixed on the children, black forked tongues flickering in a silent threat. They slithered swiftly into the cradle. Iphicles screamed in terror. From Olympus, Hera stood with arms crossed, gazing down coldly. Satisfied, she turned away. It was done. Yet as she began to step away, Hera paused, wanting certainty. She turned back to witness the final moment of her rival's child. At that very instant, Alcmene felt a sudden chill of dread course through her body. Without calling the nurses, she rushed back into the room, and there what sight met her eyes. In one corner of the cradle, Iphicles wailed in panic tears and mucus streaming down his face. Heracles, however, sat upright, legs crossed, calmly gripping the throats of the two writhing serpents with his bare hands. The snakes coiled tightly around his arms, constricting with all their strength, but Heracles did not release his hold. Slowly, the dark green coils, hard as tempered steel, slackened further, and finally fell limp. Heracles let the two serpents drop to the floor with a dull thud. He looked up serenely at Alcmene, his clear eyes steady and calm, while she stood frozen, unable to believe what she was witnessing. At that same moment, high upon Olympus, there was another who stood just as stunned and bitter. Heracles dropped the two serpents to the ground with a dull thud. His clear, steady eyes looked calmly at his mother Alcmene, who stood frozen, unable to believe what she was witnessing before her. At that same moment, high on Olympus, there was another being who stood equally stunned and deeply embittered. The years that followed passed quietly, yet were filled with constant movement beneath the surface. Heracles grew more quickly than other children his age, not only in physical stature, but also in presence and bearing. The strength within him seemed to be shaped day by day, guided not by ambition, but by the natural rhythm of destiny itself. The memory of the serpents in the cradle gradually became a tale whispered among people, yet to Heracles, it remained only an early chapter in a much longer road that still lay ahead. Then one day, when Heracles reached the age of 18, fate placed before him another trial. No longer was it a silent danger lurking in a cradle, but a direct confrontation between human strength and the untamed instincts of nature. With only the sound of rushing wind as warning, a massive body powerful yet moving with the quiet agility of a wild cat, leapt from behind and struck straight at Heracles' shoulder. Cithaeron was a limestone mountain range, stretching roughly 10 miles across central Greece, lying between the city-state of Boeotia to the north and Attica to the south. The mountains there did not rise sharply into the sky, but rolled in gentle overlapping ridges, forming a landscape of balanced harmony. Dense pine forests clung to the slopes deep green throughout the year. Between the ridges lay broad level valleys, carpeted with soft green grass, like a vast natural cushion, dotted with olive trees stretching toward the sun. Overhead, the sky bore the pure blue of the Mediterranean, with drifting white clouds. Golden sunlight spread evenly across the land, and a light breeze carrying the scent of fresh grass and wildflowers. From high above the valley appeared dotted with slow-moving patches of white, like wandering clouds. Drawing closer, one would see that they were flocks of sheep grazing peacefully, bells around their necks, chiming softly in the wind. Shepherd dogs ran in wide circles around the flocks, barking and in watchful alertness. At the heart of this tranquil scene stood a young shepherd whose presence anchored the landscape around him. The young man was about 18 years old. He wore a white chiton woven from sheep's wool falling to his knees. The garment covered his left shoulder, leaving his right shoulder and arm bare, revealing bronze-toned muscles gleaming under the sun. Leather sandals hugged his steady feet. He was tall and well-proportioned, his physique strong and naturally balanced. Even when seated on the ground, he radiated quiet power. When he rose to his full height, his body stood firm like a mountain, confident and unshaken. His clear blue eyes were lively and alert at times, then half-lidded and contemplative at others. Thick lips curved slightly upward, paired with a full beard and a mane of curly hair falling freely over his shoulders, forming a vivid image of masculine beauty that drew the gaze of all who saw him. Beside him rested a club made of red bronze, so heavy that few men across the Greek city-states could lift it. For Heracles, it was a familiar companion, a weapon bound to his daily training, where physical strength and inner resolve were forged together. A voice suddenly called out from afar, breaking the stillness of the mountains. "Master Heracles." Heracles stood and turned his gaze toward the foot of the mountain. An elderly figure, limping yet moving with surprising urgency, was making his way toward him. It was Doulos. Doulos had once been saved by Amphitryon, Heracles' adoptive father, during the campaign against King Pterelaus on the island of Taphos. Grateful for his life, he pledged to serve Amphitryon until his final breath. A wound to his left leg from that battle left him with a permanent limp, yet his loyalty never wavered. From the time Heracles was still an infant, known as Alcide, Doulos felt an unusual bond with him. Because of this, he was entrusted with the task of attending to Heracles throughout his years of growth. Doulos's presence among the mountains of Cithaeron formed a living bridge between past and present. From the infant who once crushed serpents in his cradle, to the young man standing amid the vast openness of nature, Heracles was entering a stage where his strength was no longer hidden potential, but an unmistakable part of who he was. And the trials awaiting him, like the unseen beast that had just leapt through the wind, were only the beginning of a journey shaped by a destiny greater than his own life. Doulos ran up in front of Heracles, bent forward with his hands braced on his knees, breathing hard. Heracles folded his arms across his chest and laughed with open delight. It must be good news that had sent Doulos rushing here like this. What else could make the old servant hurry so breathlessly? Heracles let him pause to catch his breath, glancing down at him with an amused look. Doulos had honey-colored skin-long hair that was almost entirely white and a tall, lean frame. His eyes were narrow but elongated, accustomed to looking straight ahead and far into the distance, with fine crow's feet etched at the corners. The chiton and sandals he wore had been given to him by Amphitryon as a reward for his devoted service to Heracles, even though men of his station were rarely permitted to wear sandals outdoors. Before Doulos had fully recovered his breath, Heracles grew impatient. "Come now, Doulos, what is it?" "There's good news, my young master. First of all, there's a chance to return to Thebes." Doulos replied, still speaking between gasps. "Oh, so that's it?" Heracles answered indifferently. "You're not pleased?" Doulos asked in surprise. "That's right, I feel freer here." Doulos looked slightly disappointed. He had expected Heracles to be far more excited. "I thought you would want to return to Thebes and be close to your father. One day you are meant to rule Thebes in his place. He has devoted so much care to your education, preparing you thoroughly, so that you might one day bring him glory on the throne of Thebes." "Yes, yes. You mean all those teachers my father hired to instruct me, don't you? I care deeply for him, but I have never wanted to be a king, and being shut behind city walls, forced to study poetry, music, and bookish knowledge, those are the things I find most tiresome." Hearing this, Doulos recalled Heracles' childhood. From an early age, Amphitryon had taken special care with his education, even though he loved both Iphicles and Heracles equally. After the incident in which Heracles crushed the two serpents, Amphitryon had consulted the blind prophet Tiresias about the boy's destiny. The prophecy declared that Heracles would one day accomplish wondrous feats and be welcomed among the gods of Olympus. Because of this, Amphitryon resolved to make Heracles his heir and to train him in every discipline. He himself taught Heracles the art of driving chariots. He invited the hero Autolycus, son of the god Hermes, to instruct him in wrestling and combat. Eurystheus, the finest archer in Greece, was brought in to teach him archery. Olympus and Linus were summoned to teach music, while the centaur demigod Chiron instructed him in the sciences. Heracles' deep voice broke in. "Enough of that. You can explain the reason for your visit later. For now, go and fetch the two horses tied over there. It's getting late and we need to drive the flock back to the pen before the Cytheran lion begins its hunt. Hurry." Hearing this, Doulos felt secretly relieved and immediately did as he was told. The two mounted their horses. Heracles whistled, the dogs barked loudly, and the men split to either side of the flock, guiding the sheep back toward the enclosure. Once the sheep were safely penned, Heracles asked, "So what is this business about returning to Thebes?" Doulos replied, "King Amphitryon has ordered you to slay the Cytheran lion. It has taken many cattle belonging to him and to King Thespius of Thespiae. If you defeat it, your offense against your teacher Linus will be forgiven, and you may return to Thebes." Linus had been Heracles' music teacher. In truth, unlike the arts of combat, Heracles had been a disappointing student in music and scholarly pursuits. Whenever lessons began, the teacher would lecture from above, while Heracles snored below. Most instructors eventually accepted this. Linus alone lost his temper one day and struck Heracles with a ruler, startling him awake. Struck without warning, Heracles instinctively grabbed the lyre beside him and struck back. With his immense strength, that single blow grievously wounded Linus, who later died. Brought before the court, Heracles cleverly defended himself by citing a law attributed to the wise Rhadamanthus, widely known throughout Greece. Anyone who is struck has the right to strike back. He was acquitted. Amphitryon, however, remained firm. He sent Heracles to Cytheran to tend sheep as penance, believing that life amid the calm of nature would temper his character. But Doulos added with a raised brow, "They say the lion is enormous and savage. I fear you may be in danger. Don't worry. Danger may threaten others, but not me. Even if every hero in Greece has failed to me, it is no more than an oversized cat. If my father had not ordered it, I would have asked to hunt it myself. It has taken many of my sheep as well. And as for returning to Thebes to study subjects for which I have no talent at all, I would rather grow old here than do that." At this thought, Heracles burst into loud laughter. Suddenly something occurred to him. That was only the first piece of news. What is the second? "My young master Doulos said your brother Iphicles has had his first son. He has named the boy Iolaus. Iphicles hopes you will return to celebrate with wine." "Oh, is that so?" Heracles' face lit up at once. His eyes widened, shining with surprise, and he laughed even more heartily. This, it seemed, was the truly joyful news. That burst of laughter brought a warm family moment to a close, yet at the same time it opened another turning point of destiny. After the brief joy of hearing that his nephew had been born, Heracles did not linger. Amphitryon's command regarding the Cytheran lion still weighed upon him, and he understood that only by completing this trial would the road back to Thebes truly open before him. From that moment on, the light-hearted tone of conversation gave way to the quiet focus of a hunter facing the untamed world. Heracles sat motionless, concealed among the dense leaves, high in the branches of an ancient oak. At the base of the tree, he had tethered a pair of fat sheep, the scent of fresh flesh drifting through the late afternoon air. For 49 days, he had roamed relentlessly through the tangled forests of Mount Cithaeron, patiently pursuing the infamous male lion and its mate. It was a span of time long enough to push endurance to its limit, and long enough for Heracles to understand that this was no ordinary beast. On the very first day, he slaughtered the largest sheep in the flock and placed its carcass in a dry ditch at the center of a clearing near the forest's edge. Along both sides of the ditch, he carefully set 5 large traps on each side, calculating every detail so that the lion would have only 2 possible paths to reach the bait. When everything was in place, Heracles hid downwind, calmly chewing on purple olives he had gathered earlier in the valley. To him, the plan felt flawless. It was only a matter of time before the beast fell into the trap. As dusk settled, the Cithaeron lion emerged from the forest. Its massive body, cloaked in golden-brown fur, moved slowly and silently, each step smooth as velvet as it approached the ditch. Yet 2 vultures had discovered the carcass first. They swooped down and accidentally triggered the traps along the path. The lion halted at once, lifting its head to scent the air. After a brief pause, it cautiously placed its paws into its own previous footprints, backing away step by step until it cleared the ditch, then vanished into the forest. That cunning alone explained why no one had subdued it for so many years. From his hiding place, Heracles felt a surge of anger. He burst forward with his bronze club in hand, his shout echoing through the woods, but there was nothing left to confront. The lion had already withdrawn. In that instant, Heracles realized the tactic could not be used again. The beast had learned, and it would never return to dead bait. He chose to change his strategy. First, Heracles ventured deeper into the forest to find the oldest olive tree, its wood dense, heavy, and hard as iron. He felled it himself and brought it to a craftsman, who shaped the wood into 2 massive clubs, each weighing hundreds of pounds. The bronze club, Heracles had long relied upon, carried a clear weakness. Once heated, it became difficult to wield. Olive wood was different, resilient, and able to withstand prolonged struggle. He then returned to the forest, following the familiar tracks of the Cithaeron lion. Yet the beast seemed aware of the danger closing in. It moved constantly, pausing only briefly to hunt or rest. Heracles also noticed that the lion was not alone. A smaller female stayed close at its side, heightening their vigilance and making the pursuit even more arduous. After several days, weariness began to seep into Heracles' mind. At times, he found himself thinking that the endless music lessons under Linus had not truly been the most tedious ordeal after all. The thought of turning back flickered briefly, but pride spoken aloud before his servant, and likely already carried across the Greek city-states, kept him moving forward. Now and then he came upon the fresh remains of a young deer in the pine forest beside the enormous tracks of the Cithaeron lion and the smaller prints of its mate. Yet each time Heracles drew near, the 2 beasts departed at once, leaving behind their half-eaten prey. That intelligence drew man and animals into a relentless chase with no clear end in sight. 1 man and 2 formidable beasts pursued one another through the forests of Mount Cithaeron, where the trial set before Heracles tested not only strength, but endurance, resolve, and the courage to confront the limits within himself. 48 days had passed. On the 49th day, Heracles decided to return to camp and lead out a pair of fat sheep. Now, he let them bleat beneath the oak tree. That oak stood directly along the path the 2 lions often used. More than once, they had even slept beneath its branches. Half a day slipped by. Aside from the sheep's bleating, only the sighing of wind through pine needles filled the air. Bored Heracles dozed off in the fork of the oak, hidden among dense leaves, when a sudden heavy snort jolted him awake. A rank, fetid stench thickened the air. From the low shrubs emerged a massive head, slightly lowered, with blazing yellow eyes and pupils drawn tight, ears pricked in sharp attention. The lion opened its jaws, wrinkling its muzzle to reveal long, gleaming white fangs, sharp as knives. A deep growl rolled from its broad throat, vibrating and echoing through the clearing. "Why is it alone?" Where is the female Heracles wondered. The sheep screamed in terror, bleating wildly as they struggled against their tethers, heightening the tension. There was no more time. With a single bound, the lion lunged forward. In one thunderous swipe, one sheep was killed instantly. The other had its throat torn open just as quickly. In moments, only the growling of the Cytheron lion remained mixed with the crack of breaking bones. Heracles roared and leapt down from the tree, swinging his olive wood club with all his might, striking at the massive male's spine. With astonishing speed, the Cytheron lion twisted aside, narrowly avoiding the blow that would have fallen like a collapsing mountain. It spun around and snapped its enormous jaws at Heracles' arm, but the hero pulled back in time, shouting as he moved. The lion began to circle Heracles slowly, jaws open, snarling. Its face contorted with fury, strings of white foam dripping from its mouth onto the ground. For days, it had found no prey. This man had driven it from its free and unchallenged life, forced it to hide, and now had taken its kill. The rage burning in the lion's eyes seemed capable of setting the forest ablaze. Heracles circled as well, searching for an opening. Man and lion stalked one another in a deadly dance. Why did the lion stare so intently, as if trying to mesmerize him, instead of attacking? The answer came at once. A rush of wind, then a powerful body, massive, yet swift as a wildcat, sprang from behind and clamped onto Heracles' shoulder. Instantly, Heracles released his club, reached back with both hands, seized the lioness by the neck, bent forward, and hurled her ahead. Her heavy body flew toward the oak tree, struck it with a brutal impact, crashed to the ground, and lay still. The two cunning lions had used a feint, drawing attention from the front while striking from behind. They had underestimated Heracles' lightning reflexes. One was down, but the club was gone. The Cytheron lion wasted no time. With a thunderous roar, it lunged to finish the kill. Heracles stood his ground, shifted aside to evade the charge, and as the beast flew past, he grabbed its mane, swung himself up, and in a blink landed on its back. He drove his weight down, pinning the lion to the earth, one hand forcing its head into the ground, while the other delivered blow after crushing blow to its skull, each strike powerful enough to shatter stone. The lion bellowed in fury, thrashing wildly. Its claws tore deep furrows into the soil, but the struggle weakened moment by moment. Soon blood poured from its ears and jaws. The Cytheron lion, the king of these mountains, the terror that had plagued the land for years, lay still at last. Heracles rose from the enormous body, twice the size of an ordinary lion, brushed the dust from his clothes, and smiled in triumph. 50 days of hardship had come to an end. The next morning, the people of Thespiae were struck with awe when they saw an unusually tall young man carrying the massive body of a male lion across his shoulders, while his other arm held the carcass of a smaller lioness. He named himself Heracles, son of King Amphitryon of Thebes, and presented the two lions to King Thespius, the common enemies of both Thebes and Thespiae. That evening, the city of Thespiae held a great celebration. King Thespius rejoiced and favored Heracles so greatly that he gave him all 50 of his daughters in marriage, at once eager to preserve as much as possible the bloodline of the lion-slaying hero. And so Heracles spent another 50 days celebrating weddings and living as the husband of 50 beautiful princesses, a task no less demanding and no less dangerous than slaying the Cytheron lion. That was how the fame of Heracles began to spread across the land. Once again, the tale turns to Heracles. After 50 days of unbroken wedding celebrations with the 50 daughters of King Thespius, he lived immersed in wine music and nights that seemed to have no end. At 18, Heracles had been shaped by mountain winds, wild beasts, and the sweat of the hunt. Now he found himself learning how to be a husband to 50 beautiful faces, 50 distinct temperaments, 50 pairs of waiting eyes. It was a trial of a very different kind, one that demanded endurance of the mind no less than strength of the body. Amid festivals that flowed endlessly into one another, The thought of returning to Thebes to present himself before King Amphitryon slowly drifted away, softened by laughter and intoxication. Early on the morning of the 51st day, while dew still clung to the palace roof, the old servant Doulos finally lost his composure. He dared to rush straight into Heracles' bedchamber, where the curtain still hung low and the heavy scent of wine lingered in the air. He shook Heracles firmly by the shoulder and called out in a loud voice, urgent and edged with alarm, urging him to set out at once for Thebes, for King Amphitryon was waiting in deep anxiety. Heracles lay beside his last bride, his body still weighed down by days of indulgence. He brushed Doulos's hand aside, his voice slow and drowsy, half joking as he muttered that the old man could return on his own, since the wedding festivities were not yet finished. Those words made Doulos cry out impatiently. He reminded Heracles that there were no princesses left to marry, for all of them were already his wives, and that Amphitryon now faced a very real danger. At that, Heracles sprang upright. His blue eyes flew open, and the haze of wine vanished in an instant. He pressed Doulos for answers, his voice now carrying the sharp edge of a warrior. Doulos replied briefly that everything would be explained on the road, for there was no time left to delay. Heracles hastily threw on his garments, and the two prepared to leave Thespiae. Before departing, they went to take leave of King Thespius. The king welcomed Heracles with unmistakable delight, and bestowed upon him 2 powerful war horses capable of covering 1,000 miles in a single day, along with gold and treasures as gifts. Thespius regarded Heracles as a pillar of protection for his entire city, and in his heart he envisioned a future in which the bloodline of the hero would spread and stand as an unshakable shield against every threat lurking around Cithaeron and Thespiae. On the road back to Thebes, Heracles rode in high spirits. He drank deeply, laughed loudly, and recounted to Doulos the outrageous stories of the past 50 days, treating them as yet another triumph in his life. From time to time, he reined in his horse to pluck ripe olives from the roadside, eating and laughing, as though the Lion of Cithaeron had been nothing more than a pleasant memory. Doulos watched him with concern. In a slow, measured voice, the old servant spoke of the many heroes he had seen fall, not by sword or spear, but by surrendering themselves to luxury and the allure of women. Such gentle snares, he said, crept naturally into a man's mind, draining his strength without his awareness. The warning came from one who had lived long enough to witness many turns of fate. Heracles burst into laughter, spitting an olive pit into the open air. His blue eyes gleamed with familiar arrogance as he answered mockingly, trusting completely in his own strength, insisting that no hero had ever married 50 wives at once and remained as vigorous as he. To Heracles, the power of body and will seemed sufficient to overcome anything in the world. Then he urged Doulos to speak plainly about the danger facing Amphitryon. Doulos sighed, his voice growing heavier. He told the old story that Heracles had never fully heard. Long ago, when Amphitryon and Alcmene sought refuge in Thebes, it was Amphitryon's deeds destroying the monstrous fox of Dionysus and defending the city that convinced King Creon to entrust him with the throne. Yet power came bound to a debt inherited from the past. King Clymenus of Orchomenus had once been accidentally slain during a festival honoring Poseidon, and his son Erginus had led an army against Thebes to avenge him. The war ended in Thebes' defeat and the obligation to pay tribute of 100 cattle each year for 20 years. Now that Heracles had come of age, Amphitryon wished to end this humiliation, though doing so meant facing Erginus directly. Hearing this, Heracles felt his blood surge. He tightened his grip on the reins and swore in a thunderous voice that anyone who dared threaten his father would share the fate of the Lion of Cithaeron. At that very moment, a column of troops appeared in the distance on the road to Thebes. Drums beating, banners flying. Heracles and Doulos urged their horses forward. Heracles called out, and the arrogant reply from the approaching men quickly confirmed that they were Erginus's army marching to collect the tribute. Their scornful words rang across the road, followed by mocking laughter. Heracles' fury erupted. He drove his horse straight into their ranks alone, an unstoppable, scattering the tribute army like a lion among small beasts. Cries filled the open field. Some fell, some lay wounded, others fled in terror. Those still standing were seized by Heracles, and he carved words of humiliation into their faces, as a message meant unmistakably for Erginus. Then he sent them fleeing back toward Orchomenus, leaving the road to Thebes silent once more. From that moment on, Heracles was no longer merely the young man famed for slaying a lion and marrying 50 princesses. He stepped into a new role, the son who stood as a shield for his father and his city, where personal strength became inseparably bound to the fate of an entire land. 2 days later, Heracles and Doulos saw the towering walls of Thebes rise before them. The massive city gate stood open, its thick wooden doors reinforced with bronze, catching the early morning light. They rode through the gate and into the straight, wide streets of the city, where life moved with urgency yet order, as though all of Thebes were holding its breath before an approaching upheaval. Along both sides of the road, male slaves worked bare-chested and barefoot, their powerful bodies slick with sweat as they carried baskets of grapes and olives freshly harvested from the outer gardens. At roadside forges, hammers rang sharply against glowing red iron sparks, flying as knives and swords slowly took shape. Farther on, female slaves bent over stone mortars pounding grain with steady rhythm, the sound echoing like the heartbeat of the city itself. In another corner, groups of slaves stitched leather-patched shields and repaired reins. As for the free citizens of Thebes, who were all men, they were largely absent from the city at that hour. They had gathered at the training fields beyond the walls, drilling in formation and practicing with weapons for the threat of war now loomed close. Heracles and Doulos did not linger. They rode straight toward the palace complex of King Amphitryon, the center of power and the spiritual heart of Thebes. The palace roof rose in stately grandeur, built of tall spruce timbers and adorned with marble reliefs carved in exquisite detail depicting the birth and glorious deeds of the god Apollo. Supporting the roof stood a row of sturdy white marble Doric columns, each firmly set upon a solid circular base. Between these columns stood a tall, slender figure, already waiting, a radiant smile on his face, and arms opened wide in welcome. "Brother Iphicles," Heracles cried out with delight. He leapt from his horse, took the stone steps 3 at a time, and embraced the man before him. It was indeed Iphicles, Heracles' twin brother. The two laughed aloud, their voices echoing through the vast entrance hall. They stepped back, gazing into one another's eyes, joy shining brightly after so long apart. Heracles spoke first, his voice full of hearty warmth. "O Iphicles, wise prince of Thebes?" Iphicles laughed and waved him off. "Enough, Heracles. You know fine speeches aren't your strength. Let's speak as we did when we were boys. Formalities are for others." Unlike Heracles, Iphicles was not drawn to physical power. He loved poetry, art, and philosophy. His calm face carried the thoughtful composure of one accustomed to reflection before action. "You look stronger than ever," Iphicles said, pride clear in his eyes. "Everyone at home was thrilled to hear of your feats." Heracles laughed and waved his hand. "How could I compare to you? I only killed a lion while you've become a father. I know you'll be a wonderful one, just like our father." "But where is he?" "Come inside," Iphicles replied. "Father is waiting." Old Doulos quietly led the horses away to the stables. Heracles followed Iphicles into the palace, passing from the outer hall through the main archway into a rectangular courtyard. The courtyard was surrounded by moderately sized chambers, connected by shared corridors, supported by columns smaller and more slender than those of the outer hall. Looking to either side upon entering one, could see 2 enormous statues of marble inlaid with ivory. One depicted Apollo, a bow slung across his shoulder, his face radiant and severe, symbol of order and light. The other portrayed Dionysus holding a wine cup, his expression free and exuberant embodiment of life and joy. These were the 2 patron gods of Thebes. Scattered throughout the courtyard stood smaller statues of warriors commemorating moments when the city had been defended. Opposite the main archway lay the inner palace, the residence of King Amphitryon and Queen Alcmene. Heracles slowed his steps, his gaze sweeping over the familiar surroundings as a wave of unspoken emotion rose within him. Here he and Iphicles had known a peaceful childhood. This sunlit courtyard once rang with laughter from games of hide-and-seek played with friends, soldiers, nurses, and old doulos. Here, too, Heracles had first held a weapon, first listened to the lessons of renowned teachers. Lost in these memories, Heracles did not notice a pair of clear, gentle eyes watching him quietly from behind the columns of the portico. They belonged to a maiden of remarkable beauty, tall and gracefully full in form, whose presence evoked thoughts of the goddess Aphrodite herself. In the next instant, her figure vanished unnoticed by Heracles. At that moment, King Amphitryon stood before the inner hall. His arms were folded across his chest, his head slightly tilted. Eyes narrowed in a smile as he looked upon his unruly son, returned home. Father Heracles hurried forward and dropped to one knee, deeply moved. Amphitryon reached out and lifted him up. He wore a chiton embroidered with a golden lion motif. His face was square and strong, his nose straight, his brow high, and his dark eyes warm yet commanding. In his gaze lay the deep affection of a father mingled with a quiet reverence for a son he knew bore an extraordinary destiny. His temples had grown noticeably grayer with the years. He spoke in a low, steady voice. "Heracles, you have returned. I am glad. Father, I'm sorry for making you worry. I also have news to share." "All in good time," Amphitryon said. "Come inside. A feast has been prepared for your return. Your mother is waiting as well." That evening, King Amphitryon held a celebratory banquet in Heracles' honor. By the flickering torchlight and gentle music, Heracles recounted the slaying of the Citharonian lion, the generosity of King Thespius, and the rout of Erginus's tribute-seeking army. Amphitryon listened with clear delight, then told Heracles that Thebes had already prepared its defensive plans and had been waiting only for his return to set them in motion. When the feast ended, Heracles went to see his mother Alcmene, then cradled his newborn nephew Iolaus, son of Iphicles. The gift he brought the chubby infant was the massive razor-sharp fangs of the Citharonian lion, an early token of the heroic bloodline now passing into a new generation. With the return of Heracles, the tide of war turned decisively in favor of Thebes. His presence on the battlefield lifted the spirits of the soldiers as though new life had been breathed into them. The ranks held firm, the blows fell faster and with greater precision. Erginus's forces quickly descended into chaos. Their formations collapsed, banners fell, and Erginus himself was killed amid the encirclement of the Theban army. The war ended in complete victory. Yet in the midst of that triumph, a quiet tragedy unfolded. While Heracles was charging along the front lines, cutting a path through a sea of men and spears, King Amphitryon stood upon the city walls, directing the defense. From a distant position, a hidden arrow flew piercing his armor and striking him down. By the time the news reached Heracles, Amphitryon had already been carried back to the palace, his breathing broken his life, measured only in moments. Even if Atlas had set the sky down and let the heavens collapse, it would not have shaken Heracles as deeply as the terror tearing through his chest at that instant. He dropped his weapons, left the battlefield strewn with bodies behind him, and ran straight for the palace. He forced his way through the crowd gathered outside the king's chamber, fell to his knees beside the bed, and gripped the hand that was already growing cold. "Father, please do not leave." Amphitryon lay stretched upon the bed. His eyes half closed, his abdomen wrapped in woolen bandages, soaked dark with blood. He opened his eyes and looked at Heracles, then with a faint motion signaled for everyone to leave the room, including Alcmene and Iphicles. In the stillness of the chamber, only father and son remained. Amphitryon's voice faltered each word, drawn from what little breath remained in him. "Heracles, listen to me. I am not your true father. Zeus is the one who sired you. This secret has been known only to me and to your mother. There was a time when doubt and blindness nearly led me to an unforgivable crime. Then the truth was revealed. Before the gods, I swear that throughout my life, I have loved you as my own flesh and blood." He paused, his body shaking with a cough, then continued in a whisper. "I entrust the city of Thebes to you. You will face trials more severe than any mortal has ever endured. This is the path set for one born to carry out destinies beyond imagination. Seek the prophet Tiresias and learn your fate. And remember this, no hardship is strong enough to overcome you, except the hesitation within your own heart. Conquer yourself. Rise above yourself. Heracles broke into sobs, tears mingling with his anguished cries. No, you are my only father. Please do not leave me. Amphitryon smiled and tightened his grip on Heracles' hand one last time. Be brave, my son. Lion Slayer, I am proud of you. His head tilted gently onto Heracles' arm. Outside, the morning songs for the fallen warriors of Thebes began to rise deep and solemn. As time passed, Heracles' grief slowly eased. Iphicles remained by his side, and Megara, the childhood companion, whose eyes had once followed him quietly on his return home, became his gentlest source of comfort. Affection born in loss soon grew into profound love. Creon, the former king of Thebes, gladly gave Megara, his only daughter, to Heracles in marriage. After the wedding, Heracles entrusted the governance of Thebes to Iphicles. He had never desired the throne, accepting responsibility only long enough to honor Amphitryon's final wish. Megara was gentle and understanding. As a friend from childhood, she knew Heracles' nature well and possessed the grace to soften the fierce edges of his spirit. They lived together in peace and had 3 children. The passing days seemed to have carried Heracles at last to a place of calm. Yet there was one who never looked away from him: Hera. Heracles had forgotten Hera, but Hera had never forgotten Heracles. From the heights of Olympus, she watched every movement of his life. One day she looked down upon the mortal world and saw Heracles playing with his 3 children beneath the shade of green olive trees, their laughter ringing through the sunlit garden, while Megara stood nearby, her gaze filled with contentment. Hera murmured softly, her voice cold, "Very well. This is the moment when he stands at the height of happiness." She descended at once to Mycenae, where Eurystheus ruled as king. He was Heracles' cousin, a grandson of the mighty Perseus, yet his body was frail. Even in the heat of summer, he wore several layers of garments, and a persistent cough bent him double whenever it seized him. Hera appeared before a temple, her proud gaze fixed upon Eurystheus. She asked whether he knew who she was. Trembling, Eurystheus bowed and acknowledged the goddess who had placed him upon the throne of Mycenae, Tiryns, and Medea. Hera spoke of Heracles, of the power she had taken from him, and of the terrifying strength that defined him. With every word, Eurystheus grew more uneasy. Hera leaned closer, her voice dropping low. Listen carefully. What passed between them remained unspoken. One bright noon in Thebes, Heracles returned home after training outside the city walls. With him came Iolaus, his nephew, who greatly admired his uncle's strength. Doulos had grown old and stayed behind to rest. Heracles entered the house first, while Iolaus led the horses to the stable. Suddenly, darkness fell over Heracles' eyes. Pain tore through his head. He called out for his wife and children, yet before him there was only shadow and horrifying shapes. A she-demon and 3 smaller demons lunged forward, their eyes glowing red, long fangs, dripping blood, their shrill screams piercing the air. In the chaos, Heracles believed his family had been slaughtered. Rage surged through him. He drew his dagger and struck down all 4 apparitions. When Iolaus ran inside, he found Heracles standing amid the blood-soaked bodies of Megara and the children. Heracles screamed wildly, his eyes vacant, foam at his lips. Though terrified, Iolaus acted quickly, seizing a bucket of cold water and throwing it over Heracles' face. The madness lifted. Heracles looked down and beheld the terrible truth before him. The dagger slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. His body collapsed, crumpling like a powerful bull felled by a crushing blow to the skull. Outside, the once clear sky over Thebes darkened as black clouds surged in from nowhere, blotting out the light. Blood-red lightning tore across the heavens, thunder crashing like the fury of the universe itself. And far above, beyond the thick mass of storm clouds, there seemed to echo the faint, chilling laughter of Hera mingled with the roaring wrath of earth and sky. On the highest rocky outcrop beside the lake, a mighty warrior stood revealed. Yet his appearance was painfully worn and broken. He had only just crossed the threshold of 30 years. Yet his face was carved with deep lines of anguish and torment, as though he had already endured the full bitterness of a human lifetime. His eyes were sunken and bloodshot, the veins clearly visible eyes belonging to one who had passed through countless sleepless nights. Clad in garments stained with dirt, sweat, and dust, he sat curled in upon himself atop a massive stone, utterly still, blending into the gray tones of the mountain rock. His gaze drifted outward, yet it seemed to rest on nothing at all. His mind wandered through an endless current of memories. Then, when endurance finally exceeded human limits, he collapsed forward, burying his face against his knees as sobs broke free from his chest. His tangled beard and unkempt hair trembled with each convulsive breath. That powerful body slowly tilted sideways upon the stone, curling inward, shuddering in waves. This was Heracles. A full week had passed since the day Megara and their children departed from the realm of the living. Throughout those days, Heracles moved like a man without a soul. He wept without pause, unmoved by questions, untouched by anything around him. Only on the morning of the 7th day did awareness slowly return. He left Thebes behind and made his way to Lake Iliki, seeking a moment of quiet amid the stillness of nature. Gentle winds brushed against Heracles' gaunt frame, whispering at his ear, like the familiar voice of Megara from long ago. He slowly lifted his head. From the forest lining the lake, it seemed as though the laughter of 3 children echoed from a distant morning, when golden sunlight had filled the air just as peacefully as it did now. Heracles raised his hands to cover his face as tears poured out. In his ears rang the heart-rending screams of his children, while the image of 4 blood-soaked bodies flickered before his eyes. He rose to his feet and staggered toward the rocky edge. Below him, the vast lake stretched wide, calm, and serene, as though it might hold the power to soothe every wound. Suddenly, a powerful wind surged forth. The lake churned, the air darkened despite the lingering sunlight. High above among the clouds, a radiant spectrum of colors burst into view. The clouds parted, revealing the figure of a man suspended in the sky, his form unmistakably familiar, like Amphitryon himself. A voice thundered from the heavens. "Heracles, Heracles, have you forgotten me?" Heracles froze, lifting both hands high as if reaching toward the apparition, his tear-streaked face turned upward. "Father, how could I ever forget you?" The voice returned deep and solemn. "You have forgotten my words, and so you have fallen into this suffering." Heracles spoke through choking sobs, his voice shattered. "Father, I believed my strength was enough to bear everything. But I was wrong. I failed to protect those I loved. I failed to preserve my family. My own strength became a curse. Every time I close my eyes, I see Megara and the children in agony. What reason is there for me to live?" Amphitryon replied, calm yet commanding. "You carry immense strength and great talent, yet you remain mortal. How could you decide the fate of all things? You were born to fulfill unfinished missions. When you complete that path, clarity will come. Every trial carries meaning. How you face it and how you act, that is what defines your worth." Heracles bowed his head in reflection. His father's words struck like a bell, awakening him from his inner haze. Yet the pain still surged. "I feel alone in this world." Amphitryon's voice grew firm. "Megara and the children dwell in peace within the realm of Hades, together with me. They watch every step you take. In this world, you still have those who love you. Turn back and look. And remember, your sacred mission still lies ahead." The multicolored light slowly faded. The clouds closed once more. Amphitryon's form dissolved and vanished. The sky returned to its clear blue, as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. Heracles turned around. In the distance, 4 figures rushed toward him. Iolaus ran first, followed by Iphicles, Alcmene, and old Doulos, his white hair trembling as he hurried forward. They reached him and embraced him, their tears mingling together. Heracles spread his massive arms and drew all 4 into his embrace. He exhaled deeply, his voice low and steady. Yes, there is still much for me to complete. There are still many to love. The path of protecting humankind remains before me. 2 days later, 2 riders, one young, one old, mounted upon powerful horses and set their course toward the sanctuary of Delphi, the temple of the god Apollo. They were Heracles and the aged servant Doulos. Delphi was a sacred land sought by heroes and leaders across Greece for divine counsel. It was believed to be the center of the universe, home to the Omphalos stone, where mortals and gods converged and prophecies echoed throughout the Mediterranean world. The temple stood on the southwestern slope of Mount Parnassus, overlooking the valley of Phocis and the southern coastal plains. Towering peaks, deep ravines, and treacherous paths tested every traveler's resolve. The harsher the journey, the weightier the prophecy awaiting beyond it. Heracles and Doulos endured the ascent, following the winding road toward the sanctuary. Along the path stood treasuries and small shrines bearing offerings. Above lay the theater, the stadium, and the arena near the Castalian spring. Before them rose the majestic temple of Delphi, built of marble, upheld by powerful Doric columns. Upon its cedarwood roof, reliefs depicting the glorious deeds of Apollo gleamed in the sunlight. 2 Pythian priestesses emerged to greet them. They wore pure white peplous garments, one with dark curling hair, the other with flowing golden-brown locks. The dark-haired priestess spoke. "Warrior are you, Heracles of Thebes?" Heracles bowed his head. "Yes, noble priestesses of Apollo, I am Heracles." The golden-haired priestess continued, her voice resonant. "Heracles, glorious son of Zeus. Apollo has foreseen your coming. To be purified, you shall return to Tiryns and serve King Eurystheus for 12 years, enduring 12 trials. When they are complete, your glory will reach the heavens, and the gods will grant you immortality." Heracles frowned, unease rising as the image of Eurystheus surfaced in his mind. The dark-haired priestess spoke firmly. "You have received the divine command. Fulfill it, and understanding will follow." The 2 priestesses turned and vanished into the temple, leaving Heracles standing alone in the silent courtyard. That unease followed him to Mycenae, where Eurystheus ruled. Within the palace, the king appeared frail and coughing, dwarfed by his ornate throne. Its grandeur stood in stark contrast to his trembling form. Heracles sensed Eurystheus's fear immediately. The king's eyes darted nervously, overwhelmed by Heracles' towering presence and commanding spirit. At last Eurystheus spoke, forcing authority into his voice. "Heracles, you shall remain in Tiryns. When I require you, I will summon you." Heracles nodded and departed. One afternoon, a rider arrived from Mycenae bearing the first command. From that moment on, every step Heracles took became bound to the fate of humankind and to the unfolding design of the gods. The 12 trials did not come all at once. They stretched across many years, like 12 layers of fire, forging both body and soul. The first labor was the slaying of the Nemean lion, a monstrous beast far greater than any lion that had ever existed. Its hide could not be pierced by any weapon. Heracles cast aside bow and sword and wrapped his bare arms around the creature's neck, crushing the life from it. In that moment, he learned for the first time that true strength does not reside in tools, but in unwavering commitment. The lion's skin became his armor for the rest of his life, a lasting mark of his first victory. The second labor led him to the swamps of Lerna, home of the many-headed Hydra. Each severed head multiplied, teaching Heracles that some evils cannot be overcome by brute force alone. With the aid of Iolaus, he learned the power of wisdom and cooperation, sealing each wound with fire to end the endless regeneration of the beast. Then came the golden hind of Artemis, swift and sacred. Heracles did not kill it or wound it. He pursued it patiently for an entire year until he could bring it back without violating the reverence owed to the divine. This labor taught restraint and respect for sacred order. The Erymanthian boar, ferocious and uncontrollable, was subdued amid snowstorms, showing Heracles how environment and timing can master violence. The filthy stables of King Augeas, fouled by years of neglect, were cleansed in a single day, when Heracles redirected 2 rivers, proving that intelligence can surpass raw strength. The man-eating birds of Lake Stymphalos were driven away through sound and rhythm. The Cretan bull was subdued through calm control. The flesh-eating horses of Diomedes were tamed when cruelty was turned back upon its source. Each labor reflected human nature and revealed the cost of one's actions. Heracles continued onward through distant lands. He faced the Amazon queen to claim Hippolyta's girdle, journeyed to the edge of the world to seize the red cattle of Geryon, and descended into the underworld itself to bring the 3-headed Cerberus into the light without violating the order of Hades. In every place he learned to walk the narrow line between power and responsibility, between authority and humility. When the final labor came to an end, Heracles was no longer merely a warrior famed for strength and conquest. His debt had been paid, yet more importantly, his inner transformation was complete. The 12 labors did more than destroy monsters or remove threats. Step by step, they purified his soul-shaping pain into discipline and loss into purpose. After such a long and arduous journey, it became clear that Heracles had not been born for a life of comfort, nor to avoid suffering, but to pass through it, carrying order, responsibility, and courage for both gods and mortals alike. By completing the 12 trials, he not only redeemed himself, but also revealed a model of humanity, one that bears consequences, rises after collapse, and uses strength in service of something greater than the self. This was the sacred mission of Heracles, not to become a god in order to escape being human, but to live the human condition so fully that immortality itself became deserved. The journey we have just taken has carried us through some of the great stories of Greek mythology, where gods and heroes do not merely represent supernatural power, but also reflect human limits, choices, and responsibility. From Zeus and the law of heaven, to Poseidon and the force of the sea, and finally to Heracles, the hero who walked through suffering, atonement, and inner transformation. Each story leaves behind a profound question about order, power, and the true cost of strength. Greek mythology is not simply a collection of ancient legends. It is a mirror in which humanity is invited to see itself, to recognize when strength becomes a burden, when power must be restrained, and when a person is truly worthy of being remembered. Because the length of this video is limited, we have only touched a small portion of this vast and timeless mythology. Many gods, heroes, and tragedies remain untold, waiting to be explored more deeply. If there is a story you would like us to continue next, leave a comment below. Poseidon, Athena, Apollo, or another hero or god you are curious about. The next journey will begin with your choice, and there is more. Deep beneath the world lies Tartarus, where time is no longer measured by day or night. Here the stories we have heard slowly come to rest in absolute stillness. The roars of the Titans fade away. The defiance of the fallen grows silent. What remains is an eternal order established after chaos. Tartarus is not a place of blind punishment. It is the boundary where power that exceeds its rightful limits must come to a halt, where the universe restores balance within itself. Through this journey, we see that in Greek mythology, even the most powerful beings exist under law. Strength does not stand above responsibility. Power does not endure without order. Tartarus reminds us that every transgression carries consequence, and that every soul god or titan alike must ultimately face its true place within the vast design of the cosmos. Now allow these heavy images to settle. Let your mind drift away from the deep abyss and return to the slow, steady rhythm of your breathing. There is no more battle, no thunder, only quiet surrounding you like a gentle night. If your eyes are growing heavy, let them close. If lingering thoughts remain, let them drift away like the final echoes dissolving into Tartarus itself. Tonight, there is nothing more you need to understand. Every story has been told. Every order has been restored. May you rest in peace. May your sleep be deep and unbroken. And when morning comes, may you awaken with a lighter mind. Good night.